You can wait outside." The words hung in the conference hall as everyone turned to stare at me. My fingers tightened around my presentation folder, the one containing 6 months of research that had saved the company millions. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely audible over the clinking of champagne glasses. Renata, our marketing director, gestured dismissively. "We're at capacity for the ceremony. You understand." I glanced around the spacious room. Every colleague from my department sat comfortably at tables draped in cream linen. Even Ren, the intern who'd been with us for exactly 3 weeks, the same intern who'd somehow presented my supply chain algorithm as her own during last month's board meeting. "Why would we waste a seat on you?" Renata added with a thin smile. "You're just an analyst." That moment crystallized everything: the missed promotions, the stolen ideas, the endless hours. My gaze shifted to the projection screen announcing the Innovation Excellence Award that should have had my name on it. "I see," I said, calmly opening my laptop. "Check your email." Moments later, as notification sounds echoed through the hall, I walked out, closing the door on their suddenly panicked voices. Before I continue with what happened next, could you take a moment to imagine standing in those shoes? That feeling when years of your work is dismissed while someone else gets the credit? If you've ever been underestimated or overlooked, you'll understand why what I did next changed everything. Stay with me, because this revenge was 3 years in the making, and the ending will show you exactly why patience is more than a virtue. It's a weapon. My name is Brielle Novak, and until that day, I was the senior data analyst at one of the country's fastest-growing logistics companies. I have an eidetic memory and a talent for finding patterns in chaos, skills that made me exceptional at my job but terrible at office politics. I'm the person who speaks directly and works late, who thinks solving problems matters more than who gets credit for solving them. I was wrong. I grew up in a small town where my father ran the local library and my mother taught mathematics. They raised me to believe that merit would always rise to the top, another thing they were wrong about. When I joined the company after completing my dual master's degrees, I believed I'd found my perfect match, a place where innovation and efficiency were supposedly valued above all else. My first year went exactly as I'd hoped. I created an inventory tracking system that reduced errors by 37%. I developed predictive models that helped our clients optimize their shipping routes. I even discovered a critical flaw in our flagship software that could have cost us our biggest client. Each time, I presented my findings through proper channels, following company protocol to the letter. The trouble began during my second year, when Dominic was hired as our new department head. He arrived with a reputation for turning struggling divisions into success stories. What nobody mentioned was his method, taking credit for his team's achievements while deflecting responsibility for failures. The first time it happened, I thought it was a misunderstanding. I'd developed an algorithm that predicted shipping delays based on weather patterns and port congestion. After presenting it to Dominic in a private meeting, I was surprised to find him showcasing it to executive leadership 2 weeks later, with no mention of my contribution. "Great work on the predictive model," I said afterward, thinking perhaps he'd simply forgotten to credit me. Dominic gave me a blank stare. "The conceptual framework was mine. You just helped with some numbers." I was stunned into silence. The entire framework, from conception to execution, had been mine. But as a still new employee, eager to prove myself as a team player, I let it go. That was my first mistake. Over the next several months, a pattern emerged. I would identify a problem, develop a solution, share it with Dominic, and watch as he presented it as his own insight. When I finally gathered the courage to address it with Eliana in Human Resources, her response left me cold. "Do you have documentation that these were exclusively your ideas?" she asked, not looking up from her computer. "I have the original files with my creation dates," I replied. "But did you develop these during work hours using company resources?" "Well, yes, but then they belong to the company, not to you personally. Dominic is your supervisor. If he presents departmental achievements to leadership, that's appropriate chain of command." I left her office understanding the unwritten rules. Ideas flowed upward, credit rarely flowed down. I might have continued in this frustrating but tolerable situation if not for what happened 6 months ago. After noticing inefficiencies in our cross-continental shipping routes, I spent weekends developing a comprehensive solution, a new logistics framework that would revolutionize our entire approach. The potential savings for our clients were enormous: 27% reduction in costs, 42% improvement in delivery times. I prepared a detailed presentation, practicing late into the night before the quarterly strategy meeting. But when I arrived, Dominic intercepted me at the door. "Leadership has a tight agenda today. We need to streamline," he said. "Give me your materials. I'll incorporate the key points into my overview." Reluctantly, I handed over my presentation folder. I sat through the 3-hour meeting, waiting for my portion, only to watch Dominic rush through a 2-minute summary that missed all the crucial innovations. The initiative was shelved for further review. 2 weeks later, Ren joined our team as an intern. Ivy League educated and the niece of our company's CEO, she was immediately included in meetings I had been excluded from. 3 weeks after that, she presented her new logistics framework to the executive team. My framework, with superficial changes and a new name. The initiative was immediately greenlit. Ren received a permanent position and became the rising star of our department. When I approached Dominic, his response was brutal in its casualness. "Ren's approach incorporated senior leadership priorities that your version lacked. This is business, Brielle. Results matter more than who came up with what first." That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by 3 years of work, innovations that had made millions for the company while my salary remained stagnant and my career stalled. Something shifted inside me. If results mattered more than people, I would show them exactly what that philosophy would cost them. I began working on a new project, one I never mentioned at the office, never accessed on company devices, and never developed during business hours. I enhanced my original logistics framework, identifying weaknesses and incorporating solutions that would make the version they'd stolen look primitive by comparison. But this was just the beginning. I started cataloging every instance where my work had been appropriated, creating a detailed record with timestamps, original files, and witness accounts from colleagues who had seen the pattern but remained silent. I scheduled coffee meetings with former employees who had left under similar circumstances, gathering perspectives and building connections. I discovered I wasn't alone. Tamsin from product development had left after her patent-worthy innovation was claimed by her manager. Leo from client relations resigned when his strategy for retaining our largest account was presented by the VP without attribution. Each conversation revealed a company culture that systematically exploited its most innovative employees while rewarding those who excelled at internal politics. More importantly, these conversations built me a network of talented, undervalued professionals who recognized the same toxic patterns. People who, like me, had continued creating and innovating despite the lack of recognition, because that's who we fundamentally were. 3 months before the award ceremony, I approached Gail Iverson, a venture capitalist known for funding startups that disrupted established industries. I presented my enhanced logistics framework along with a comprehensive business plan. "This could transform the entire sector," she said after reviewing my materials. "But why leave a secure position to start from scratch? Competition in this space is brutal." "Because I'm not starting from scratch," I replied, revealing my second presentation. Profiles of 7 industry veterans, including Tamsin and Leo, who had committed to joining my venture if it secured funding. Gail's expression changed. "Now that's interesting. And your former employer?" "Will likely continue taking credit for innovations they didn't create until they realize those innovations have stopped coming." 2 weeks later, I had a funding commitment. 1 month after that, I had office space leased under a holding company name and legal agreements with my future team members. I secured preliminary patents for my enhanced framework and reached out to clients who had expressed frustration with my current employer's inflexibility. Through careful networking, I identified 5 major clients who were considering moving their business elsewhere. I arranged discreet meetings, presented my solution, and secured tentative agreements contingent on my company's launch. Everything was in place. I just needed the right moment to make my move. The quarterly award ceremony provided the perfect opportunity. After learning that Ren would be receiving the Innovation Excellence Award for her logistics framework, I prepared my final act. I drafted resignation letters for myself and my 7 colleagues, finalized client transfer agreements, and prepared a press release announcing our new venture. That morning, I dressed with particular care, selecting a deep blue dress that projected confidence without ostentation. I arrived early, clutching my presentation folder, not because I expected to present, but because I wanted them to see me holding it one last time. I stood at the entrance of the grand conference hall, watching as colleagues filed in and found their assigned seats. I saw Dominic guiding Ren to a prime position near the executive table. I noticed Renata, the marketing director who had always treated operations staff as beneath her notice, checking the seating arrangements. When she spotted me, her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. That's when she spoke those words. "You can wait outside." As I stood there, absorbing the casual cruelty of her dismissal and Ren's smirking face, 3 years of accumulated slights crystallized into perfect clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The moment I sent that email, containing our resignation letters, client transfer notifications, patent applications, and the press release scheduled for the following morning, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. As notification sounds chimed throughout the room, I walked away without looking back. I had only reached the parking garage when my phone began ringing. The CEO's name flashed on my screen. I declined the call. Then came texts from Dominic. Then Eliana from HR. I ignored them all. If you're still with me, thank you for your patience. The journey I've shared so far is one many of you might recognize. The frustration of having your contributions overlooked, your ideas stolen, your potential dismissed. If this resonates with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear stories of others who found their power in unexpected ways. Because what happened next wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine while creating something even better. As I walked to my car, I felt my phone vibrating continuously in my pocket. I finally pulled it out to see 7 missed calls from the CEO, 3 from Dominic, and a flurry of increasingly desperate text messages. The most revealing came from Renata. "Whatever they're offering you, we'll double it. Come back inside now." That's when I knew they'd finally read what I sent. Comprehensive documentation of how my stolen algorithm had been fundamental to the company's recent success, along with proof that their version, the one they'd given Ren credit for, was merely a shadow of my complete innovation. I was unlocking my car when I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I turned to find Vincent, our vice president, breathing heavily after chasing me down 3 flights of stairs. "Brielle, wait," he gasped, his usually impeccable appearance now disheveled. "You can't just leave like this. The company needs you." I regarded him quietly. Interesting. An hour ago, I wasn't even worth a seat at the ceremony. "That was a misunderstanding," he said, straightening his tie. "A clerical error." Was it also a clerical error when my name was removed from the quarterly reports? Or when Ren presented my work as her own? Or when I was passed over for promotion 3 times while watching others advance using my innovations? Vincent's expression tightened. Business is complicated. Individual contributions often get absorbed into larger initiatives. "Yes, I've noticed whose contributions get absorbed and whose get celebrated," I replied, "but that's no longer my concern. The clients you've contacted are bound by exclusivity agreements. They can't simply switch to your startup." I smiled for the first time that day. "You might want to review those agreements again. The language restricts them from working with your competitors. But since my solution operates on an entirely different framework, one I developed independently, on my own time, it creates a new category. Your legal team confirmed this when they reviewed the original concept 6 months ago and determined it wasn't worth pursuing." Vincent's face paled. "What do you want, a promotion? Equity? Name it." What I wanted was recognition for my work, respect for my contributions, a seat at the table I helped build. I opened my car door. "But you've shown me something more valuable, that I don't need your table. I can build my own." As I drove away, I watched in my rearview mirror as more company executives poured into the parking garage, their award ceremony completely forgotten. My phone continued buzzing with notifications. I pulled over briefly to silence it, but not before seeing a message from Tamsin. "It's done. We're all out. Meeting you at the new office." The new office was a converted industrial space I'd leased under a holding company name 3 weeks earlier. When I arrived, my team was already there. Tamsin, Leo, and 5 other colleagues who had suffered similar experiences at our former employer. Each had submitted their resignations simultaneously with mine, creating a talent exodus the company couldn't possibly recover from quickly. "Did they try to stop you?" asked Meredith, our operations specialist who had been repeatedly overlooked despite generating our former employer's most profitable client relationships. "Vincent chased me to the parking garage," I replied. "Offered me anything I wanted." "Bet that felt good," Leo said, handing me a cup of coffee from the machine we'd installed the previous weekend. "Not as good as this will," I said, opening my laptop to show them the response I'd received from our first major client. They had not only agreed to transfer their business to us, but had introduced us to 2 additional prospects impressed by our innovative approach. Over the next several hours, we finalized our launch strategy. Our company, Nexus Paradigm, would officially announce its existence the following morning, with our proprietary logistics framework as its flagship offering. The patents I'd filed would protect our intellectual property, and the client agreements we'd secured would give us immediate revenue. At 7:30 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it until Tamsin glanced at the screen. "That's the board chairman's private line," she said quietly. I answered, putting it on speaker so my team could hear. "Ms. Novak," came the gravelly voice of Preston Fulton, the rarely seen chairman of my former company's board. "I believe we need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied. "I've spent the afternoon reviewing the situation. The documentation you provided is concerning. I'd like to meet with you privately to discuss a resolution." "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Fulton, but there's nothing to resolve. My decision is final." "Perhaps I haven't made myself clear." His tone hardened. "Our company has resources you cannot imagine. If you proceed with this venture of yours, we will be forced to take measures to protect our interests." "Are you threatening me?" I asked calmly. "I'm outlining consequences," he replied. "Legal action for breach of confidentiality. Claims against your patents. We can ensure your startup never gets off the ground." I signaled to Leo, who began recording the call. "Mr. Fulton, everything I've done is legal and documented. The innovations I'm taking forward were created on my personal time, using my personal resources. Your own legal team confirmed they were distinct from company property. As for confidentiality, I've disclosed no proprietary information. I've simply informed clients that I'm starting a new business and invited them to consider our services." "Clients who are contractually obligated to us," he countered. "Clients whose contracts include performance clauses that you've repeatedly failed to meet." I didn't need to persuade them to leave. I simply offered them a better option when they were already looking elsewhere. The line went silent for a moment. "What would it take to bring you back?" he finally asked, his voice noticeably softer. "Name your terms." I looked around at my team, talented professionals who had been undervalued, overlooked, and exploited. People who had trusted me enough to take this leap together. "There are no terms, Mr. Fulton. This isn't a negotiation tactic. It's a new beginning." After ending the call, we spent hours preparing for the media response we anticipated following our announcement. By midnight, exhausted but exhilarated, we gathered around the conference table we'd assembled ourselves the previous weekend. "To Nexus Paradigm," Tamsin said, raising a paper cup of vending machine coffee, "and to Brielle, who showed us all what's possible when you refuse to stay where you're not valued. It's not just about me," I insisted. "Every person in this room made this possible. We're building something together that none of us could create alone." That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, despite the uncertainty ahead. The next morning, our press release went out at exactly 8 a.m., just as the trading day began. By 8:15, financial news sites were reporting on the sudden emergence of a disruptive new player in the logistics sector. By 9, they were reporting on the subsequent drop in my former employer's stock price. At 9:30, we gathered around a screen to watch our former CEO give an emergency press conference. His usual confidence was nowhere to be seen as he attempted to reassure investors that the departure of a few employees would not impact operations. The market disagreed. The stock dropped another 7% during his 17-minute speech. When he announced that Dominic would be stepping down to pursue other opportunities, I felt no satisfaction, only confirmation that the company would continue its pattern of scapegoating individuals rather than addressing its toxic culture. By noon, our phones were ringing constantly with calls from potential clients, investors, and even former colleagues interested in joining us. The industry had taken notice, and our calendar quickly filled with meetings. What my former employer had failed to understand was that true innovation doesn't come from titles or hierarchies. It comes from valuing the people who generate ideas. 1 week after our launch, as we prepared for a meeting with our largest new client, I received an email from Ren. The subject line read simply, "I didn't know." The message was brief. I was told the framework was collaborative, with your minor contributions already compensated. I never intended to take credit for your work. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I started to type a response, then stopped. Her apology might have been sincere, but it changed nothing. She had been a symptom of the problem, not its cause. Instead of replying, I closed the email and focused on preparing for our client meeting. 3 months after our launch, Nexus Paradigm had secured contracts with 27 clients, including 3 of the largest shipping companies in the country. Our revolutionary approach to logistics optimization had reduced costs for our clients by an average of 31%, exceeding even my original projections. We had grown from 8 employees to 23, carefully selecting people who brought both skill and integrity to their roles. The true vindication came 6 months after the award ceremony that had changed everything. My former company announced a strategic restructuring that industry analysts recognized as a desperate attempt to remain competitive. Their stock had fallen 43% since our launch, and rumors of a potential buyout were circulating on financial news sites. I was reviewing our quarterly results when my assistant mentioned that Vincent, the former VP, was in our reception area asking to meet with me. "Did he have an appointment?" I asked. "No," she replied, "but he said it was important." I considered sending him away, but decided against it. Whatever he wanted, I was curious enough to hear it. When Vincent entered my office, the change in him was striking. The confident executive had been replaced by someone who looked as though he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward a chair. "What can I do for you, Vincent?" He placed a folder on my desk. "This is a formal acquisition offer. The board wants to purchase Nexus Paradigm and integrate your technologies into our existing framework." I opened the folder, glanced at the figure on the first page, and closed it again. "That's a substantial offer," I acknowledged. "It reflects the value of what you've built," he replied, "and the cost of competing against you. Why are you the one delivering this? Where's the investment team?" Vincent shifted uncomfortably. "The board thought you might be more receptive if the approach came from someone you knew. Even though that someone told me I wasn't worth a seat at the table?" I never said, "You never had to say it. You showed it in every decision, every meeting invitation that never came, every time you let someone else take credit for work they didn't do." Vincent looked down at his hands. "The company has changed since you left. We've implemented new policies on innovation recognition, created mentorship programs, restructured compensation to reward original thinking. All things that could have been done before if anyone had cared enough to listen." "Yes," he admitted quietly. "That's why I'm really here. Not just for the acquisition offer, but to ask, would you consider returning as Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to the board?" I studied him for a moment, recognizing the desperation behind the offer. 6 months ago, such recognition would have meant everything to me. Now, it felt hollow. "I'm going to review your acquisition offer with my team and our advisors," I said carefully, "but I won't be returning as an employee under any circumstances. I've built something I believe in here, with people who value each other's contributions. That's not something I'm willing to compromise." After Vincent left, I sat alone in my office, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of being overlooked had transformed into the power of creating something authentic. The colleagues who had once dismissed me were now approaching me as equals or seeking my approval. But the true victory wasn't in their recognition. It was in discovering that the table I had fought so hard to sit at wasn't worth a place at all. By building my own company, I had created not just a seat for myself, but a place where everyone's contributions were valued. The revenge I had planned had succeeded beyond my expectations, but its sweetest fruit wasn't watching my former employer struggle, it was watching my new company thrive. We weren't just profitable. We were creating a workplace where innovation flourished because people felt safe sharing their ideas. 6 months after that meeting with Vincent, we declined the acquisition offer and instead announced an international expansion. 1 year after the award ceremony where I'd been told to wait outside, I was invited to give the keynote address at the industry's largest conference. As I walked onto that stage, I saw faces I recognized in the audience, including several from my former company. But this time, they weren't looking at me with dismissal or contempt. They were looking at me with something new: respect. I began my speech with the same words that had once been used to exclude me. "You can wait outside." A murmur ran through the audience. "Those words changed my life," I continued. Not because they hurt, though they did, but because they finally showed me the truth, that I was waiting for recognition from people who would never give it freely, that I was measuring my worth by their standards rather than my own. The room fell silent as I shared my journey from overlooked analyst to industry innovator. I didn't name my former employer or colleagues. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about them anymore. It was about the power of knowing your own value, even when others fail to see it. I looked out at the faces watching me, some inspired, some uncomfortable, all attentive, and delivered my final thought. The most powerful seat isn't the one others save for you. It's the one you build yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where your contributions were overlooked or someone else took credit for your work? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your power in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes being excluded from one table is the push you need to build something better, something that's entirely yours. The crystal champagne flute slipped from my fingers and shattered against the marble floor. 100 faces turned toward me at once. The cheerful buzz of conversation at the annual company gala died instantly. "I asked you a question, Miss Phoebe." Mrs. Adriana Reed's voice cut through the silence as she took another step toward me, her designer heels crunching over the broken glass. "My son Liam has been missing for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, and I believe you know exactly where he island." The company's founder and CEO, Maxwell Reed, set his drink down with deliberate slowness and began pushing through the stunned crowd toward his wife. "Adriana, please," he said, his voice calm but tight. "This isn't the place." "No," she shouted, her composed facade crumbling completely. "I saw her looking at Liam's photograph on your desk yesterday. She wasn't just looking, Max. She was trembling." "Mrs." Reed's eyes never left mine. "I've interviewed 68 private investigators. I've appeared on 32 news programs. I've spent millions searching, and all this time, the answer was right here." My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. The elegant ballroom of the Grand Harmony Hotel seemed to tilt sideways. 300 colleagues watched, paralyzed, as the company's beloved philanthropist power couple imploded before their eyes. "Security," Maxwell called over his shoulder, his expression darkening. Mrs. Reed grabbed my wrist, her nails digging half-moons into my skin. "Please," she whispered, desperation replacing her anger. "He's my only child. Is he alive?" The ballroom's double doors burst open as 2 security guards rushed in. Maxwell reached for his wife. "She's having an episode, gentlemen. Please escort her." He faked the conservation records. I blurted out, my voice stronger than I expected. "Your husband is destroying protected rainforest, and your son found out." The room exploded into chaos. Maxwell lunged toward me, but the company's legal counsel, Preston, yanked him backward. "He's not running away," I continued, heart hammering in my chest. "He's being held against his will in—" Maxwell broke free and clamped his hand over my mouth, dragging me backward as I kicked and struggled. Mrs. Reed collapsed to her knees, wailing a sound so primal it silenced the entire room. "Your son is alive," I managed to gasp as Maxwell's grip loosened for a fraction of a second. I can prove it. The last thing I saw before security dragged me from the ballroom was Adriana Reed's eyes locking with mine, wide, desperate, and suddenly blazing with furious hope. If you're as shocked as everyone at the Reed Conservation Foundation's annual gala was that night, you'll definitely want to follow this story to its conclusion. Trust me when I say what happens next changed not only my life but the lives of hundreds of people connected to Maxwell Reed's empire. Hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss how this confrontation ends, because the truth about Liam Reed's disappearance is far more twisted than anyone imagined. My name is Phoebe Grant, 32 years old, former environmental photojournalist specializing in documenting endangered species habitats, current executive assistant to Maxwell Reed, CEO of Reed Conservation Foundation, and Reed Enterprises. At least, that's who I pretended to be for the past 18 months. The truth? I was hired 3 years ago to document Reed's supposed conservation efforts in the Brazilian rainforest. The foundation had received international acclaim for protecting over 200 0 acres from development and establishing breeding programs for endangered species. I remember my first day on the Reed estate, a sprawling property on the outskirts of Seattle, with its own greenhouse complex housing rare plants from around the world. I'd been escorted through gardens meticulously designed to showcase Maxwell's commitment to biodiversity. "Phoebe, Dad said you're staying in the East Wing guest house." A lanky teenager bounded down the stone steps, camera hanging from his neck. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, just like his mother's. "I'm Liam, resident photography nerd and your unofficial tour guide." Over the next month, as I prepared for the Amazon expedition, Liam shadowed me. Unlike his polished, calculated father, Liam radiated genuine enthusiasm for conservation. He'd inherited his mother's passion for protecting wilderness, spending school breaks volunteering at wildlife rehabilitation centers. "Mom always fought for these causes," he told me one evening while we cataloged equipment. "Dad only got interested after they married, but now he's even more committed than she is." I noticed something when he said this, a slight hesitation, a flicker across his face. "You don't sound convinced," I observed, testing the waters. Liam glanced toward the door before whispering, "Sometimes the numbers don't add up. The reports say we're protecting certain species, but when I visit the sites, those animals aren't there." That conversation should have been my warning. Instead, it became the thread that, when pulled, unraveled everything. The Amazon expedition began with appropriate fanfare. Maxwell made sure conservation journalists documented our departure. 20 of us flew to Brazil. Scientists, photographers, Reed Foundation staff, and Liam, who'd convinced his father to let him join as my assistant during his summer break. For 2 weeks, everything proceeded according to plan. We photographed lush rainforest, cataloged species, and interviewed indigenous community members who praised the Reed Foundation's work. Then came the day that destroyed my life. Liam and I had separated from the main group to photograph a reported cluster of rare orchids. We'd hiked nearly 2 miles off trail when we heard machinery, heavy equipment grinding through forest. "There's nothing scheduled for this section," Liam said, checking the expedition map. We followed the noise until we reached a clearing that wasn't marked on any foundation documents. Bulldozers tore through pristine rainforest. Workers in hard hats operated drilling equipment while others loaded core samples into labeled containers. "This can't be right," Liam whispered, his face draining of color. I snapped photographs reflexively, my journalist instincts kicking in. The workers wore unmarked clothing, but their equipment cases bore serial numbers I carefully documented. We retreated before being spotted, hiking in stunned silence back toward base camp. That night, I researched the equipment numbers and discovered they belonged to mining exploration machinery, rented by a subsidiary company that traced back through 5 shell corporations to Reed Enterprises. The conservationist was mining the very land he claimed to protect. "We need to tell Mom," Liam said when I showed him my findings. His hands trembled as he examined my evidence. "She doesn't know. She can't know." We agreed to gather more proof before approaching Adriana. For the next 3 days, we documented discrepancies between the Foundation's public maps and actual activities. We discovered that protected areas had been quietly rezoned, indigenous communities relocated under false pretenses, and endangered species counts falsified. The night before we planned to return to Seattle, I slipped out to photograph documents in the expedition coordinator's tent. I had just finished when a hand clamped over my mouth. 2 security guards dragged me to Maxwell's private tent. He sat calmly at a folding desk, holding my camera's memory card between his fingers. "Ambitious, aren't you?" he said, voice soft but menacing. "Did you really think I wouldn't monitor my own son's communications?" My stomach plunged. "Where's Liam?" "Sleeping. Quite deeply, thanks to his evening tea." Maxwell's smile didn't touch his eyes. "By morning you'll be gone, and he'll understand what a mistake he made trusting you." He turned his laptop toward me. On screen were dozens of photographs showing me accepting envelopes from known poachers, stealing artifacts from indigenous lands, and handling protected wildlife, all expertly photoshopped. "These have already been sent to every major environmental publication, conservation, organization, and grant committee worldwide," he explained. "Your credibility is destroyed. Your career is over." "They won't believe these," I argued, but my voice wavered. "They already do. Check your email." He slid my phone toward me. My inbox overflowed with cancellations of upcoming assignments, demands to return grant money, and horrified messages from colleagues. "Why?" I asked, fighting back tears. "You're already wealthy. Why destroy protected land?" "Because under that land are rare earth minerals worth billions," he answered simply. "The Conservation Foundation is the perfect cover. No one questions our presence in restricted areas. Liam will tell everyone what we found." Maxwell's expression hardened. "My son will receive treatment for his unfortunate mental health episode. His obsession with conspiracy theories about his own father is clearly a cry for help." Ice spread through my veins. "You can't do that to your own child." "I'm protecting him from his own naivety," Maxwell countered. "Now, you have 2 choices. Leave quietly tonight and never contact my family again, or face criminal charges for the activities documented in those photos. The indigenous communities you've supposedly championed would be particularly interested in your theft of their sacred artifacts." 2 hours later, I was on a cargo plane heading back to civilization, my career and reputation in tatters, with no way to help Liam. For weeks afterward, I tried desperately to contact Adriana Reed, calling her charitable foundations and sending messages through every channel I could find. All were blocked or returned. I attempted to approach her at public events, only to be intercepted by security. Then came the news. Liam Reed, troubled teen son of conservationist Maxwell Reed, had run away after an argument with his parents, leaving behind a letter cutting ties with his hypocritical family. The press painted him as an unstable, ungrateful child who couldn't handle the pressure of his family legacy. I knew the truth. Liam hadn't run away. He'd been silenced. For the next year, I survived by waiting tables and sleeping on friends' couches while obsessively tracking the Reed family. I watched as Maxwell accepted humanitarian awards while expanding mining operations under the guise of conservation. I saw Adriana make tearful pleas for information about her son on national television while Maxwell stood supportively beside her. What none of them knew was how far I would go to expose the truth. 18 months ago, I stopped being Phoebe Grant. After changing my appearance, darkening my naturally auburn hair to deep brown, wearing colored contacts to hide my green eyes, and adopting rectangular glasses, I created a new identity. Beth Wilson had an impeccable resume as an executive assistant with references that would check out thanks to friends who agreed to play the part of former employers. I spent months studying Maxwell Reed's company, identifying which department would put me closest to him while requiring minimal previous experience in that specific field. I practiced a different speaking pattern, slightly lowering my natural voice and adopting more formal speech patterns. I even learned to write with my non-dominant hand to change my handwriting. The first 3 times I applied for positions at Reed Enterprises, I was rejected. The 4th time, luck intervened. Maxwell's longtime assistant quit without notice following what office gossip called a complete breakdown. The HR department, desperate to fill the position, called me in for an interview. Walking into Reed Tower that first day felt like stepping into the lion's den wearing a suit made of raw meat. My hands trembled so badly, I had to clasp them behind my back as the HR director led me through security. I was certain Maxwell would recognize me instantly. He didn't even look up when I entered his office. "Your resume says you're organized and anticipate needs before they're expressed," he said, reviewing my fabricated credentials. My last assistant failed spectacularly at both. Don't make the same mistake. When he finally glanced up, I held my breath. His eyes narrowed slightly, and my heart nearly stopped. "Have we met before?" he asked. "I don't believe so, sir," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I would remember meeting someone of your stature." He studied me for another excruciating moment before nodding. Start tomorrow, 6 a.m. For 6 months, I became the model assistant. I arrived before Maxwell and left after him. I anticipated his needs, managed his calendar flawlessly, and earned his grudging approval, all while methodically searching for any information about Liam. Maxwell kept his most sensitive files locked in a private office adjacent to his main one, a room requiring biometric access that only he and the head of security could enter. But I discovered something interesting. The cleaning crew accessed this room using a master keycard after hours. It took 3 months of volunteering for late shifts before I could observe their routine, and another month before I could accidentally spill coffee on one cleaner's uniform, offering to finish her rounds while she changed. Those 15 minutes with the keycard gave me my first glimpse into Maxwell's secret operations. I couldn't download files without leaving digital fingerprints, but I photographed what I could with a tiny camera hidden in my watch. These fragments revealed references to something called Project Sentinel and a facility in Switzerland. That night, I dreamed of Liam for the first time in months. In my dream, he stood in a stark white room, pounding on a window, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear. I woke up gasping, more determined than ever. My next breakthrough came during a staff meeting when Preston, the legal counsel who had restrained Maxwell at the gala, mentioned upcoming changes to the foundation's structure. I noticed Maxwell shoot him a warning glance. After the meeting, they retreated to the private office, their voices rising enough that I could hear fragments about transfer of guardianship and permanent arrangement. When Preston emerged, his face was ashen. I followed him to the elevator under the pretense of delivering documents. "Are you all right?" I asked once we were alone. He loosened his tie, clearly shaken. "Fine. Just ethical disagreements. About the foundation restructuring?" I ventured. His eyes snapped to mine, suddenly suspicious. "That's confidential." "Of course. I just handle so many of Mr. Reed's documents, it's hard to keep track of what's common knowledge." The elevator stopped, and Preston stepped out. He hesitated, then turned back. "Beth, how well do you know Maxwell Reed?" "Only what everyone knows. Brilliant businessman, dedicated conservationist, devoted husband." Something flashed across Preston's face. Disgust, perhaps, or guilt. Sometimes appearances are carefully constructed. Before I could respond, the doors closed between us. 2 days later, Preston didn't come to work. His assistant received a terse email stating he'd taken an indefinite leave of absence for health reasons. His office was cleaned out overnight. When I mentioned his absence to Maxwell, he merely said, "Preston couldn't handle the pressure. Shame." That evening, I followed Maxwell to a private dinner with the company's head of security, Andre. I watched from a nearby table as they spoke in hushed tones, Maxwell occasionally glancing around the restaurant. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I read Maxwell's lips when he clearly said, "Permanent solution." My blood ran cold. Was Preston's sudden departure connected to Liam? Had he discovered something that threatened Maxwell? I needed an ally, and Preston might be my only hope. It took me a week to track him down. His apartment sat empty, his phone disconnected. Finally, a barista at his favorite coffee shop mentioned he'd talked about staying at his sister's cabin near Lake Chelan. I drove 3 hours that weekend, finding the remote cabin tucked among pine trees. When Preston opened the door, his eyes widened in alarm. "How did you find me?" he demanded, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "I need to know about Liam Reed," I said, ignoring his question. He tried to close the door, but I jammed my foot in the gap. "Please, I know Maxwell is hiding something terrible. You don't understand what you're getting into," Preston hissed. "He destroys people who cross him. I know exactly what he's capable of," I replied, meeting his gaze. "More than you can imagine." Something in my expression must have convinced him. He stepped back, letting me enter. Inside, papers covered every surface. Legal documents, medical reports, financial records. Preston had been busy during his health leave. "I've been Maxwell's attorney for 11 years, he said, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. "I've justified many questionable actions as business necessities. But what he's doing to his own son, I can't be part of it anymore." "Where is Liam?" I asked, my heart pounding. Preston pulled out a file. "Officially, receiving treatment at an exclusive mental health facility in Switzerland called Sentinel Wellness Center. In reality, he's being held against his will, drugged into compliance, and prevented from communicating with anyone outside." Why would Maxwell do this to his own child? Because Liam threatened to expose everything, not just the illegal mining operations, but the tax fraud, the bribes to government officials, the environmental data falsification. Maxwell built his entire empire on lies, and Liam had proof. How do you know all this? Preston wouldn't meet my eyes. Because I helped create the legal framework that made it possible. Maxwell convinced me Liam was unstable, a danger to himself. I prepared the guardianship documents giving Maxwell complete control over his son's care and finances until he turns 30. And now? Now I've seen the medical reports. The treatments they're administering would make any normal person appear unstable. They're deliberately keeping him confused and disoriented. I leaned forward. Preston, I need your help to free him. It's impossible. The facility has security like a fortress. Maxwell pays millions to ensure his son stays contained. Nothing is impossible, I insisted. I need documentation, facility layouts, staff information, anything you have. Preston stared at me. Who are you really? No executive assistant would risk everything like this. I took a deep breath and revealed my true identity. His shock turned to understanding, then determination. I'll help you, he said finally, but we need to be careful. Maxwell has already sent people looking for me. As if summoned by his words, headlights swept across the cabin windows. Car doors slammed outside. Back door, Preston whispered, grabbing a laptop and flash drive. Take these and run. I'll stall them. I slipped out just as someone pounded on the front door. Racing through dark woods, I heard shouting behind me, then a sound that stopped my heart, a single gunshot echoing through the trees. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, hidden a quarter-mile away. With trembling hands, I started the engine and sped away, Preston's laptop and drive hidden under my seat. The local news reported Preston's death as a hunting accident the next day. Maxwell organized a lavish memorial service and delivered a moving eulogy about friendship and loyalty. I watched from the back row, swallowing my rage, knowing the truth. That night, I opened Preston's laptop. Password protected, of course, but he'd included a sticky note inside the case with a simple clue: your client's son's birthday. After 3 attempts, I was in. What I found changed everything. Not only did Preston have detailed information about Sentinel Wellness Center, he had been secretly communicating with Adriana Reed for months, feeding her doubts about her son's disappearance. The files revealed a shocking truth. Adriana Reed wasn't the oblivious, grieving mother I'd assumed her to be. According to Preston's notes, she had been investigating her husband for months, gathering her own evidence about the Foundation's activities and her son's sudden mental health crisis. Preston had been secretly providing her with documents while pretending loyalty to Maxwell. His final message to her, sent the day before his death, read, "A new ally will contact you soon. Trust her completely." He'd been planning to introduce us before Maxwell's men found him. Scrolling through Preston's files revealed something else. Surveillance photos of Liam at Sentinel Wellness Center. My hands trembled as I opened them. After 3 years, I finally saw him again. The images showed a gaunt version of the vibrant young man I'd known. His eyes appeared vacant, his movements captured mid-shuffle across a sterile courtyard. The timestamp was from just 2 weeks earlier. He was alive, but barely recognizable. Sleep evaded me that night as I pored over facility blueprints, staff rotations, and security protocols. Sentinel presented itself publicly as an exclusive rehabilitation center for wealthy clients, but Preston's notes exposed its darker purpose: a detention facility disguised as a wellness retreat where inconvenient relatives could be stashed away indefinitely under the guise of treatment. By morning, I knew what I had to do: contact Adriana Reed. But approaching the wife of the man who wanted me, silenced, carried enormous risk. For 3 days, I observed her routine from a distance. Unlike her husband, Adriana maintained a predictable schedule: daily walks through Volunteer Park, charity meetings on Tuesdays, and weekly Thursday appointments at an exclusive spa. I chose the park for our first meeting. Wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, I positioned myself on a bench along her regular route. When she approached, I stood directly in her path. "Mrs. Reed," I said quietly, "Preston sent me." She froze, her security detail several paces behind. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows where your son is being held." Her composure cracked momentarily before she regained control. Without looking back at her security, she said, "Give me 2 minutes," then gestured for me to walk alongside her. "Preston is dead," she whispered once we were out of earshot. "I know. I was there the night it happened." Her steps faltered. "Maxwell?" I nodded. "Preston gave me everything before they killed him. I know about Sentinel, I have recent photos of Liam. The carefully controlled mask she wore in public shattered. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. He's alive? You've seen him? Photos only. Mrs. Reed, I need you to trust me. Why should I? I don't even know you. I took a deep breath and removed my glasses. 3 years ago, I was Phoebe Grant. I was with Liam when we discovered your husband's illegal mining operation in the Amazon. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by suspicion. Maxwell said you manipulated my son, that you were caught selling information to competitors. All lies, I interrupted. Your husband destroyed my reputation to silence me, just like he's silenced your son. Her security detail was growing restless, moving closer. I pressed a burner phone into her hand. I'll call you tonight at 9. If you want to save Liam, answer. I walked away before her security could reach us, disappearing into the crowded park. I half expected police at my apartment door that evening, but nothing happened. At 9 precisely, I called the burner phone. She answered on the first ring. I want proof. Check your email. I'd sent her 3 things. A photograph of Liam and me in the Amazon before everything fell apart, a recent surveillance image of him at Sentinel, and a portion of Preston's notes detailing Maxwell's elaborate scheme. The line went silent as she reviewed them. When she finally spoke, her voice had transformed, steel replacing vulnerability. What do you need from me? Access to your husband's private accounts, travel itinerary for the next month, and a DNA sample to prove I'm acting on Liam's behalf when we reach Sentinel. That's all? For now. I've spent 3 years searching for my son while sleeping next to the man who took him from me, she said, her voice eerily calm. I'll get you everything you need and more. True to her word, Adriana became my most valuable ally. While maintaining a flawless facade as Maxwell's devoted wife, she methodically gathered intelligence. Her position gave her access to information I could never obtain as a mere assistant. We established a secure communication system, meeting and changing locations every few days. She revealed that she'd suspected Maxwell's involvement in Liam's disappearance from the beginning, but lacked proof. The perfect conservation family image they projected was a carefully crafted lie. Their marriage had been fractured for years. Maxwell threatened to destroy my environmental foundation if I ever left him, she explained during one of our meetings. It's the only meaningful work I've ever done. Then Liam disappeared, and leaving became impossible. Why didn't you go to the authorities? I asked. With what evidence? Maxwell controls the local police chief, 2 federal judges, and has a senator in his pocket. Who would believe me against the great humanitarian Maxwell Reed? Working together, we pieced together the full extent of Maxwell's operation. The Conservation Foundation served as the perfect front, allowing his company's exclusive access to protected lands rich in minerals and timber. Governments welcomed him with open arms, indigenous communities trusted him, and environmental organizations celebrated him. Meanwhile, his mining subsidiaries extracted billions in resources from the very lands he claimed to protect. 2 weeks after our first meeting, Adriana delivered the final piece we needed, Maxwell's complete travel schedule. He would be attending an environmental summit in Norway for 4 days the following month, giving us our window to act. But just as our plan took shape, disaster struck. I arrived at work one morning to find Maxwell's private office door ajar, an unprecedented security breach. Inside, a team of IT specialists huddled around his computer system. Data breach, one explained when I inquired. Someone's been accessing Mr. Reed's private servers. My stomach dropped. Had our digital footprints been discovered? Maxwell stormed in moments later, his face contorted with rage. Find whoever did this, he snarled at the security team. Check every employee, every contractor. Someone's been stealing information. His eyes fell on me, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he knew everything, but he merely barked, cancel all my appointments today, and tell security to double the detail on my wife. That night, Adriana called from a new number. He knows something's happening, she whispered. He's watching me constantly. 2 new security guards followed me all day. Did you access his private server? I asked. No, I used the passwords on the standalone systems like we discussed. Her voice quavered. Phoebe, he came to my room last night, the first time in over a year. He asked if I'd been in contact with anyone unusual recently. My blood ran cold. What did you tell him? That the only unusual contact was the private investigator he hired as a publicity stunt. Bitterness edged her words. He seemed satisfied, but I don't think we have much time. She was right. The next morning, I arrived to find security conducting employee interviews. Each staff member was being questioned about their recent activities and access to company information. When my turn came, two stone-faced security officers led me to a conference room where Andre, the head of security, waited with a file folder. "Miss Wilson," he began pleasantly, "how long have you worked for Mr. Reed?" 18 months, I answered, forcing my voice to remain steady. "And in that time, have you ever accessed information not directly related to your duties?" "No." Andre slid a paper across the table. A log of after-hours building access showing my key card had been used multiple times during late evenings. "I often work late to prepare for Mr. Reed's early meetings," I explained, "including accessing the executive floor at 11:42 p.m. last Tuesday." A trap. I hadn't been in the building that night. "I was home last Tuesday evening," I said carefully. Andre's smile tightened. "Your keycard says otherwise. Someone had used my credentials. The walls were closing in. Perhaps there's been a system error," I suggested. "Or someone borrowed my card. I sometimes leave it on my desk during lunch." Andre made a note without responding. "We're conducting background checks on all employees with access to sensitive information. Standard procedure." My carefully constructed identity wouldn't withstand intense scrutiny. I needed to accelerate our timeline. I texted Adriana as soon as I left the interview. "They're on to us. We move tonight." Her response came hours later. "Can't. He's taking me to the mountain house for the weekend. Armed guards everywhere." My mind raced. The mountain house was Maxwell's fortress, a remote compound with state-of-the-art security. If he suspected Adriana, taking her there could mean he planned to deal with her away from witnesses. I had no choice. I sent one final message, Code Amber, our emergency protocol. That evening, I stayed late at the office, waiting until most employees had departed. Using the master keycard I'd secretly duplicated months earlier, I accessed Maxwell's private office. I had 20 minutes before the next security sweep. Working quickly, I downloaded files from his computer onto encrypted drives and photographed physical documents. As I prepared to leave, my elbow knocked a framed photo from his desk. Maxwell, Adriana, and Liam at a foundation gala years earlier. The glass cracked as it hit the floor. When I picked it up, I noticed something odd, a small key taped to the back of the frame, hidden by the stand. On impulse, I pocketed it before replacing the photo. I was halfway to the elevator when alarms blared throughout the building. Red emergency lights flashed as security doors began automatically locking. Someone had triggered a security breach protocol. I ran for the stairs instead, descending as quickly as possible. 2 floors down, I heard doors banging open above me. Security in pursuit. Reaching the parking garage, I headed not for my car, which would surely be watched, but for the service entrance used by delivery trucks. I slipped out just as guards flooded the garage. 3 blocks away, a nondescript sedan pulled alongside me, the passenger window lowered to reveal Adriana Reed. "Get in," she ordered. "We have 12 hours before he realizes I'm gone." "How did you escape the mountain house?" I asked as I slid into the car. She pulled away from the curb, driving with unexpected skill through evening traffic. "I've been planning my escape for years, waiting for the right moment. Tonight, I finally drugged his whiskey, something I should have done long ago." Her voice was different, harder, more determined than I'd ever heard before. "The security guards believe I'm sleeping in my private suite with strict instructions not to be disturbed." A cold smile played across her lips. "By morning, they'll discover I'm gone, along with evidence of Maxwell's crimes delivered anonymously to the FBI." "You reported him?" "Preston did, posthumously. He arranged for everything to be sent if he missed 3 consecutive weekly check-ins. Maxwell never suspected his trusted attorney had built a dead man's switch." As we sped toward the private airfield where a chartered plane waited, Adriana handed me a small velvet pouch. "I found this in Maxwell's safe. I think you should have it." Inside was a tarnished compass with a faded inscription, "To find your way home, L." I recognized it immediately, the gift I'd given Liam when we first began exploring the Amazon together. "He kept it as a trophy," Adriana said quietly, "along with other items from people he's destroyed." The compass needle trembled in my palm, pointing steadily north, toward Switzerland, toward Liam. "We're coming," I whispered to the compass. "Hold on, just a little longer." As our plane lifted into the night sky, neither of us could have imagined the horror awaiting us at Sentinel Wellness Center, or the lengths to which Maxwell Reed would go to protect his darkest secrets. The 8-hour flight to Zurich gave us time to finalize our strategy. Using Preston's files, Adriana and I pored over Sentinel's security protocols, staff rotations, and facility layout. The center sat isolated on a private alpine plateau, accessible only by a single winding road or helicopter. It housed 20 patients, wealthy individuals whose families paid extraordinary sums to keep them contained. The staff believes these are legitimate mental health cases, Adriana explained, reviewing employee records. Only the director and security chief know the truth, which makes most of them innocent, I noted. We need to focus on extracting Liam, without harming staff who think they're helping patients. The plan we developed was risky but potentially effective. Adriana would arrive openly as the concerned mother, using her considerable influence to demand an inspection visit. Meanwhile, I would enter through service channels using credentials Preston had prepared before his death. What if Maxwell has already alerted them? I asked as our plane began its descent. Adriana's expression hardened. Then we moved to contingency plan. I've spent 3 years building a network of journalists who trust me. One call, and Sentinel's secrets are exposed worldwide. That could take too long to help Liam. She reached into her handbag and removed a small handgun. Then we do this the direct way. I stared at the weapon. You know how to use that? I grew up on a Montana ranch before I became an environmental activist. Her smile was grim. Maxwell never bothered to learn that part of my history. We landed at dawn, greeted by slate-gray skies and icy mountain air. A discreet luxury car waited at a private terminal, another arrangement from Preston's contingency plans. As we wound through spectacular alpine scenery, the beauty around us stood in stark contrast to our mission. Sentinel Wellness Center appeared on the horizon after an hour's drive, a sprawling modernist structure of glass and stone that resembled an exclusive resort more than a detention facility. Security was subtly integrated into the design, cameras disguised as lighting fixtures, motion sensors hidden among garden sculptures, and a perimeter fence camouflaged by strategic landscaping. We parked at a scenic overlook half a mile from the entrance to finalize our approach. Remember, Adriana said, checking her appearance one last time, I'll create a distraction in the administrative wing. You have 30 minutes to locate Liam and reach the service exit on the east side. And if he's too sedated to move? She handed me a small case. Adrenaline injection, enough to temporarily counteract whatever they're giving him, according to the medical contact Preston trusted. 30 minutes, I repeated, memorizing the facility map one final time. We embraced briefly before separating, Adriana continuing toward the main entrance in our rental car, while I circled through dense forest to approach from the service area. The employee entrance was exactly where Preston's blueprints indicated, a nondescript door beside loading docks where supply trucks made deliveries. I waited behind a stand of pines, watching staff arrive for the morning shift. Most wore pale blue uniforms and displayed ID badges on lanyards. When a group of 3 approached, chatting casually about weekend plans, I timed my emergence to blend with them. Preston's forged ID already hanging around my neck. Heart pounding, I nodded at the security guard, who barely glanced at my badge before waving our group through. Inside, the facility's true nature became apparent. Despite designer furnishings and artwork adorning public spaces, security measures were omnipresent, reinforced doors with biometric locks, staff wearing discreet earpieces, and multiple monitoring stations. I navigated toward the residential wing, following directions from the facility map. According to Preston's files, Liam was housed in room 307, classified as a high-security therapeutic space for patients with elopement risk. The clock was ticking. Adriana would have reached reception by now, demanding to see the facility director. Soon, alarms would sound as she created her diversion. I entered a staff break room, found an unattended medication cart, and began pushing it confidently down the corridor. Medical staff rarely faced questioning in such facilities. They were expected to move throughout restricted areas. Approaching the residential wing required passing through a secure checkpoint. I held my breath as the guard examined my ID. Then, the medication chart on my cart. New? He asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Transferred from Zurich, I replied, mimicking the slight accent I'd heard from other staff. Still, learning the layout, he studied me another moment before nodding toward the biometric scanner. My pulse raced. This was the weakness in our plan. Preston had obtained security protocols but couldn't provide actual fingerprint access. Before I could panic, the guard's radio crackled. All security personnel report to administration immediately. VIP visitor situation. Adriana had arrived. The guard hesitated, torn between protocol and the urgent summons. Systems glitching again, he muttered, overriding the biometric requirement with his master keycard. Go ahead, they need all hands in admin. Relief flooded through me as the doors slid open. I pushed my cart forward, waiting until the guard disappeared before abandoning it and moving quickly toward room 307. The residential corridor was eerily silent. No voices, no movement, just the hum of air conditioning. Each door featured a small digital display showing patient name, status, and medication schedule. Most read, in-room therapy, or resting. Liam's display showed, meditation session, with a medication dose scheduled in 20 minutes. I needed to move fast. His door required another keycard swipe. I tried the one I'd lifted from the unattended cart, holding my breath as the light flashed. First red, then mercifully green. I pushed the door open slowly, bracing myself for what I might find. The room resembled a luxury hotel suite with one disturbing difference. There were no handles on the inside of doors or windows. Sunlight streamed through reinforced glass, illuminating minimalist furniture and artwork clearly selected to create a calming environment. In a meditation alcove sat Liam Reed, cross-legged on a mat, eyes closed, breathing rhythmically. He looked both like and unlike the young man I'd known, thinner, paler, his once vibrant energy subdued to eerie stillness. Liam, I whispered, approaching slowly. His eyes remained closed. I've completed today's mindfulness exercise, Dr. Richter. I'm ready for my medication. The flat, rehearsed quality of his voice sent chills down my spine. Liam, it's me, Phoebe. His eyes opened slowly, pupils dilated from whatever drugs coursed through his system. He stared through me, rather than at me, expression vacant. Phoebe Grant doesn't exist anymore, he recited mechanically. She manipulated me and betrayed my father's trust. My perception was compromised by her influence. Horror washed over me. They'd been systematically erasing his memories, replacing them with Maxwell's narrative. That's what they want you to believe, I said urgently, kneeling before him. But you know the truth. We found the illegal mining operation. We discovered your father's real business. His expression remained blank, but something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, perhaps recognition. Your mother is here, I continued, checking my watch. 20 minutes had already passed. We've come to take you home. Mother visits on approved dates only, he replied automatically. Father says she's too emotional for frequent contact. I reached for the compass in my pocket, pressing it into his palm. You gave me this before they took you away. Remember? You said it was your grandfather's, a man who taught you to always seek the truth. His fingers closed around the tarnished metal. For a moment, he stared at it uncomprehendingly. Then his hand began to tremble. They said, he began, voice cracking. They told me I imagined everything, that I had a psychotic break. They lied, I said firmly. Everything we discovered was real. Your father has been keeping you here to silence you. Tears filled his eyes, the first genuine emotion breaking through the pharmaceutical haze. Phoebe? Is it really you? Before I could answer, alarms blared throughout the facility. An automated voice announced, security protocol activated. All patients return to rooms. All staff implement containment procedures. Something had gone wrong with Adriana's distraction. We need to move now, I urged, helping Liam to his feet. He swayed unsteadily, leaning heavily against me. Can you walk? They increased my medication yesterday, he murmured, struggling to focus. Said I was becoming resistant to treatment. I retrieved the adrenaline injection from my pocket. This will help temporarily, but it will be unpleasant. Do you trust me? His eyes, clouded but increasingly aware, met mine. Always did. I administered the injection, watching as the powerful stimulant fought against the sedatives in his system. His breathing quickened, pupils contracting as adrenaline flooded his bloodstream. That's intense, he gasped, straightening as artificial energy surged through him. It won't last long, I warned. We need to reach the service exit. We moved into the hallway, finding it empty as staff responded to the facility-wide alert. According to our plan, we had 10 minutes to reach the east exit where Adriana would meet us after creating her diversion. We managed 2 corridors before encountering the first obstacle, a nurse rushing in the opposite direction who stopped abruptly upon seeing us. Patient 307, she exclaimed, reaching for her radio. You shouldn't be, Liam reacted with unexpected swiftness, grabbing her radio and pulling her into an empty room. I'm sorry, he told the startled woman as I secured the door. You're just doing your job, but they've been lying to you about me. We continued our escape, using service corridors to avoid main hallways. Liam moved with increasing coordination as the adrenaline counteracted years of chemical suppression. With each step, awareness seemed to return to his eyes. 3 years, he murmured as we descended a maintenance stairwell. They stole 3 years of my life. Focus, I urged. We'll have time for that later. The service exit appeared ahead, an emergency door that would trigger alarms when opened, but would lead directly to the rendezvous point. According to our plan, Adriana should be waiting with the car. I pushed the door open, bracing for the alarm. Instead, silence. The emergency system had been disabled. Outside, alpine sunshine momentarily blinded us. When my vision cleared, I froze in horror. Maxwell Reed stood beside our rental car, arm wrapped around Adriana's throat, a gun pressed to her temple. 3 security guards flanked him, weapons drawn. Touching reunion, Maxwell said coldly. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies at my own facility? Liam stiffened beside me, the fog in his mind clearing enough to recognize the danger. Father, he said, voice stronger than I'd heard since entering his room. Let her go. My son, the environmental crusader, Maxwell replied with mock affection. Still fighting imaginary battles, I see. Your illness makes these paranoid conspiracies seem so real to you. Stop lying, Adriana gasped against his grip. It's over, Maxwell. Everything's been exposed. His arm tightened around her neck. Nothing is over until I say it, Island. The helicopter is waiting. We're all taking a little family trip to discuss this situation privately. The coldness in his voice made his intentions clear. None of us would survive that discussion. Security breach in West Wing. Multiple intruders. A voice suddenly blared through the facility's external speakers. All personnel respond immediately. Confusion crossed Maxwell's face. This wasn't part of our plan. The momentary distraction was all Adriana needed. She slammed her elbow into Maxwell's ribs with surprising force, simultaneously twisting the gun away from her head. As he doubled over, she wrenched free of his grasp. Chaos erupted. The security guards hesitated, unsure whether to pursue Adriana or maintain focus on Liam and me. That split-second uncertainty proved fatal to their mission. From the forest edge, figures emerged. A tactical team in unmarked black uniforms, weapons trained on Maxwell's security detail. Federal police, drop your weapons, commanded a voice through a megaphone. Maxwell's face contorted with rage and disbelief. What is this? Who authorized? Maxwell Reed, announced the team leader, approaching with handcuffs. You're under arrest for environmental crimes, fraud, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder. As the officers secured Maxwell and his security team, a familiar figure stepped from the tactical unit, Preston. You're dead, Maxwell sputtered, staring in shock. Reports of my death were strategic, Preston replied calmly. After your men came for me, the Federal Environmental Crimes Task Force suggested I disappear while they built their case. Understanding dawned on me. The cabin shooting, staged, Preston confirmed. We needed Maxwell to believe he'd eliminated the threat while we gathered final evidence. Adriana rushed to Liam, embracing him as tears streamed down both their faces. My boy, she whispered. My beautiful boy. I stood apart, watching their reunion with a complex mixture of emotions. After 3 years of single-minded focus on exposing Maxwell and rescuing Liam, the sudden victory felt almost unreal. Preston approached, offering a satellite phone. There's someone who wants to speak with you. I accepted it cautiously. Hello? Miss Grant? A woman's authoritative voice came through. This is Director Helena Reeves of the Environmental Crimes Division. I believe we owe you an apology and considerable thanks. For what? 3 years ago, we received evidence against you that appeared conclusive. We now know those materials were falsified by Maxwell Reed. Your name has been officially cleared, and your professional reputation restored. The vindication I'd fought so long to achieve had finally arrived, delivered matter-of-factly over a satellite connection. There's more, the director continued. The evidence you and Preston compiled has exposed a global network of environmental fraud. We've frozen assets worth billions and prevented destruction of over 2 million acres of protected habitat. As Maxwell was led away in handcuffs, raging impotently against his fate, I finally approached Liam and Adriana. Thank you, Adriana said, grasping my hands. For never giving up. Liam, still struggling against the effects of long-term medication, studied my face with increasingly clear eyes. You changed your appearance, he observed. Had to become someone else to find you. His hand reached out tentatively, as if confirming I was real. I remembered you, even when they said you weren't real. I held on to that. As medical personnel arrived to evaluate Liam's condition, I stepped back, suddenly uncertain of my place in this family reunion. My mission was complete. What now? Liam seemed to read my thoughts. Don't disappear again, he said, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Promise me. Before I could respond, his eyes rolled back and he collapsed, the adrenaline wearing off, his system crashing from the chemical roller coaster. He needs immediate medical attention, a paramedic announced, loading him onto a stretcher. Years of these medications will require careful detoxification. Adriana squeezed my hand before climbing into the medical helicopter with her son. This isn't goodbye, she promised. We'll find you when he's stabilized. I watched the helicopter lift away, carrying Liam toward proper medical care and the beginning of a long recovery. Preston joined me as the thrum of rotors faded into alpine silence. Was this your plan all along? I asked. Not entirely, he admitted. We hoped to build the case without involving you or Adriana directly. But when Maxwell increased security and moved to silence me, we needed to accelerate everything. So I was what, bait? A catalyst, Preston corrected. Your determination gave Adriana the courage to finally act against her husband. And without you, we would never have located Liam or gathered enough evidence for these charges to stick. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse as Maxwell Reed was sentenced to 27 years for his crimes. His empire had collapsed spectacularly, with assets seized and redirected to legitimate environmental restoration projects. Adriana had transformed her foundation into a whistleblower protection organization, providing resources for those exposing environmental crimes worldwide. She nodded to me from across the courtroom as the judge delivered the sentence. Beside me sat Liam, still thin but clear-eyed and increasingly himself again. His recovery had been arduous, with withdrawal symptoms and psychological trauma requiring intensive therapy. But his determination proved stronger than the chemicals that had suppressed it. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us, shouting questions about the sensational case that had dominated headlines for months. Just one statement, Liam announced, his voice steady. Taking my hand, he continued, Today proves that truth eventually surfaces, no matter how deeply it's buried. My father believed wealth and power could silence anyone. He was wrong. Later that evening, we walked along Lake Geneva's shore, the water reflecting a spectacular sunset. What will you do now? Liam asked. Return to wildlife photography? I considered the question I'd been avoiding. I'm not sure that person exists anymore. Then who are you now? The question hung between us as I watched light play across the water. Someone who understands how fragile truth can be, I finally answered, and how hard we must fight to protect it. He took my hand, the same compass I'd given him years ago now hanging from a chain around his neck. Whatever you decide, I hope our paths stay connected. As alpine twilight deepened around us, I realized my revenge hadn't taken the form I'd imagined. I hadn't destroyed Maxwell Reed. His own crimes had accomplished that. Instead, I'd helped restore what he'd tried to erase: truth, justice, and the bond between a mother and son. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about destroying your enemy, but rebuilding everything they tried to take from you, only stronger than before. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like and subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments about what you might have done in Phoebe's situation. Would you have risked everything for truth, or chosen a different path? Your support helps these important stories reach those who need to hear them most. The numbers don't lie, Adelaide. $800,000 lost under your watch. Your creative vision is stagnant, your client relationships are deteriorating, and frankly, the board has lost confidence in your leadership. Parker's voice carried across the conference room with practiced authority. The 7 board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding my eyes. I gripped the armrests of my chair, knuckles whitening as I processed his audacity. Lost under my watch? My voice emerged quieter than intended. Parker, we both know exactly where that money went. His wife, Tessa, sat beside him, her expression a masterclass in controlled innocence. The emerald necklace at her throat, purchased last month, I'd bet my life on it, caught the light as she tilted her head with concern. Adelaide, please. Parker slid a single sheet of paper across the polished tabletop. This is difficult for everyone. Your resignation, effective immediately, allows you to depart with dignity. The alternative involves a formal investigation into financial mismanagement. Financial mismanagement? I repeated, disbelief making my voice rise. You transferred $800,000 of company money into your wife's stationery startup without board approval. I have the transaction records. Tessa's perfect composure cracked. My business is a legitimate diversification strategy. You're just jealous because your tired ideas aren't cutting it anymore. Parker placed his hand over hers. The board has reviewed the situation and supports the investment. Your performance metrics, however, have been concerning for months. I glanced around the table at people I'd considered allies, even friends. One by one, they looked away. I built this company from nothing, I said. 10 years of my life, my ideas, my relationships, my reputation. And now you want me to walk away because you stole company funds? Nobody's stealing anything, Tessa interjected, standing up. Parker had full authority to make investment decisions. Co-authority, I corrected. Nothing leaves our accounts without dual approval. Which you gave, Parker said smoothly. Don't you remember our discussion last quarter? We have witnesses. The resignation letter sat untouched between us. I saw my future disappearing. A decade of work erased with a signature. I'm not signing, I said, pushing back from the table. And I'm not resigning. This is my company too. Tessa's perfectly manicured hand closed around her coffee cup. Know when you're finished, she hissed, then flung the contents directly at my face. The hot liquid splashed across my blouse, droplets searing my skin. Gasps echoed around the table as I sat there, coffee dripping from my chin, the smell of hazelnut creamer mixing with humiliation. Nobody moved to help me. Nobody spoke. This meeting is adjourned, Parker announced calmly, as if his wife hadn't just assaulted me. Security will escort Adelaide from the premises. Her access codes will be deactivated by end of day. As I sat there, soaked and stunned, I made a silent promise to myself. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Wow, I can't believe how many of you have messaged me saying you've experienced workplace betrayal too. It means so much that you're connecting with my story. If you're finding value in these experiences I'm sharing, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment about the worst betrayal you've ever faced. Your support keeps me going through this difficult journey. My name is Adelaide Quinn, though everyone calls me Addie. I'm 34 years old with an eye for details that most people miss and a memory that rarely forgives. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew your business taught me to observe without being observed, a skill that would prove invaluable later. I moved to the city with 2 suitcases, an event planning certificate, and ambitions too big for my hometown to contain. The early days were a blur of 12-hour shifts at catering companies, wedding planning assistant gigs, and networking events where I'd nurse one drink all night to save money. That's where I met Parker Ellis. He stood out in the crowded hotel ballroom, tall, articulate, with a magnetic confidence that drew people in. While I collected business cards with nervous determination, he collected promises and possibilities. You have good ideas, he told me that night, after listening to me ramble about interactive experience design. But ideas without execution are worthless. Parker had the business acumen I lacked, financial knowledge, operational experience, and family connections to capital. What began as conversation evolved into collaboration. We launched our event planning business, Spotlight Events, from a tiny rented office with water-stained ceilings and questionable heating. Our strengths complemented each other perfectly. I created experiences that clients couldn't stop talking about, while Parker handled the numbers and operational logistics. We worked 18-hour days, sacrificed weekends, and poured everything into building something meaningful. The first year nearly broke us. 3 major clients backed out, our initial investor pulled funding, and we spent one memorable week working by candlelight when we couldn't pay the electric bill. But we survived, then thrived. By year 3, we had a proper office and a small team. By year 5, our client list included regional corporations and wealthy families. Parker met Tessa at one of our events, a charity gala for the art museum. She worked in luxury retail marketing, all sharp angles and sharper ambitions. From the beginning, something about her made me uneasy, though I dismissed it as simple jealousy over how she commanded Parker's attention. She understands the world we're trying to break into, Parker explained after introducing us. Old money, exclusive circles. She can open doors for us. And she did. Tessa's connections brought us clients we'd never have accessed otherwise. When she and Parker married 2 years later, our business benefited from their union. I was even a bridesmaid at their wedding. though I suspected the invitation came from Parker rather than Tessa. The warning signs appeared gradually. Small expenses Parker approved without consultation. Client meetings I wasn't invited to. Decisions made during conversations I wasn't part of. But our company continued growing, so I buried my concerns beneath gratitude for our success. Until tax season last month, when our accountant called with questions about 8 separate transfers of exactly $100,000 each. I don't recognize these transactions, I told her, reviewing the statements. They weren't in the quarterly reports Parker prepared. Codes, they're marked as strategic investment, she explained, but there's no supporting documentation. I spent that evening tracing the money. Each transfer went to the same account number, one not associated with any of our regular vendors or partners. When I searched the routing information, it led to a recently established LLC, Pressed Elegance, a luxury stationery and paper goods company. The registered owner, Tessa Ellis. My hands trembled as I compiled the evidence. $800,000, nearly our entire operating reserve, transferred without my knowledge or approval. Our business account showed Parker's authorization code on each transaction, but not mine, despite our operating agreement requiring dual authentication for amounts over $10,000. I called an emergency meeting with Parker the next morning. He arrived late, immaculately dressed as always, carrying the premium coffee he'd recently developed a taste for. $800,000, Parker? I placed the transaction records on his desk. To your wife's business? Without telling me? His expression didn't change. The company needed diversification. Pressed Elegance is a strategic investment. Strategic for whom? You didn't consult me. You didn't get board approval. This violates our operating agreement. He leaned back, studying me with new coolness. Your concepts have grown repetitive, Adelaide. Clients are noticing. This investment protects our future. By draining our accounts? By breaking our partnership agreement? The board will support my decision when they see the projections. He gathered the papers I'd brought, tapping them into a neat stack. Perhaps this is a good time to discuss your role moving forward. That conversation led directly to today's ambush, the board meeting where Parker and Tessa tried forcing my resignation, culminating in coffee thrown in my face and my humiliating escort from the building I helped create. I sat in my car in the parking garage, still damp with coffee, security's pitying glances burning in my memory. My phone buzzed with a text from Parker. Be reasonable. Take the severance and move on. Reasonable? After everything we'd built together? After his betrayal? I started the engine, hands steadier than they had any right to be. If Parker thought I'd disappear quietly, he didn't know me at all. Before the day ended, I made 3 calls. To my bank, to freeze any pending transactions, to a locksmith, to change my home locks in case Parker still had the emergency key, and to Gerald Michaels, the best business litigation attorney in the city. They've made a critical mistake, Gerald said after hearing my story. Documented embezzlement leaves a trail that's difficult to erase. But we need to move quickly. What I didn't realize then was how deep Parker's preparation went. When I arrived home, my laptop was missing, taken during the security escort from my office. My backup files showed signs of access, and my email was already locked out, administrator privileges revoked. The message was clear. Parker had been planning this for months, carefully removing my access to evidence while establishing an alternative narrative. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd systematically worked to erase me. That night, as rain tapped against my bedroom window, I lay awake calculating losses. My company, my reputation, my financial security, all taken by someone I had trusted completely. My phone chimed with an email notification. From an address I didn't recognize came a single line. Check the society page announcement tomorrow. Sorry. It was from Britt, our receptionist, the one person at the office who had always been more loyal to me than to Parker. Morning brought the answer when I opened the digital business journal. There, smiling from the screen, were Parker and Tessa announcing the exciting evolution of Spotlight events into a joint venture with Pressed Elegance, creating an integrated luxury experience company. The announcement praised Parker's visionary leadership and Tessa's creative direction. Not a single mention of me. 10 years of my life, erased in a press release. My phone rang. Adelaide, we have a problem. The company bank accounts have been emptied. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. What do you mean emptied? Transferred to new accounts yesterday afternoon, right after your board meeting, Gerald explained. They moved quickly, too quickly to be spontaneous. Can we get it back? We can try, but they'll claim it was a legitimate business decision. The board minutes will probably show approval. Minutes taken at a meeting where I was humiliated and removed. The calculated precision of Parker's betrayal made my stomach turn. This wasn't opportunistic. It was methodical. What do we do? I asked, pacing my living room. Document everything. Forward me any emails, contracts, evidence of the original transfers to Tessa's company, and prepare for things to get worse before they get better. Gerald's warning proved prophetic. By noon, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from confused clients. Parker had apparently spent the morning calling our entire client list, informing them of my unfortunate departure due to personal and professional issues. He'd hinted at financial improprieties. On my part, clients I'd built relationships with for years now questioned my integrity. Venue managers stopped returning my calls. Vendors suddenly became unavailable. Parker wasn't just pushing me out, he was salting the earth behind me. 3 days later, I received a cease and desist letter claiming I was contacting Spotlight clients in violation of company policy. The letter referenced confidentiality clauses I'd supposedly signed, clauses that had been added to our employee handbook after I'd been locked out of the system. They're trying to isolate you, Gerald said when I forwarded him the letter. Make you toxic in the industry so no one will listen when you tell your story. That afternoon, I drove to our bank, requesting documentation of the dual authorization requirement for large transfers. The bank manager's expression told me everything before she spoke. I'm sorry, Ms. Quinn, but the account authorization protocols were changed last month. Mr. Ellis is now the sole required signature on all transactions. That's impossible. Our operating agreement requires dual authorization. The paperwork was submitted with both signatures, she said, turning her monitor to show me the form. There was my signature, a reasonable facsimile, but definitely not mine. That's forgery, I said, my voice rising. I never signed this. The manager's sympathetic expression hardened slightly. Miss Quinn, these are serious allegations. Perhaps you should discuss this with Mr. Ellis directly. I still intue. I'd like copies of all transactions for the past 6 months, I insisted. And I want it noted that I'm disputing this authorization change. She printed the records reluctantly, but the damage was done. Parker had been systematically removing my authority for months, all while maintaining our friendly partnership facade. Back in my apartment, I spread the bank statements across my kitchen table. The 8 transfers to Tessa's company were just the beginning. Dozens of smaller transactions showed money flowing to consultants I'd never heard of, services we'd never used, and vendors with vague descriptions. My phone rang. An unknown number. Adelaide? It's Holly from accounting. Her voice was hushed, nervous. I'm calling from my personal phone. They let me go this morning. Holly had been with us for 3 years, meticulous and honest. Why? Budget cuts, officially. But I asked too many questions about those transfers. She paused. There's something else. They're shredding documents, boxes of them. And yesterday, they installed new accounting software and told us not to migrate certain files. My heart raced. Holly, would you be willing to tell that to my lawyer? Silence stretched between us. I need this job, Adelaide. I have student loans. I understand, I said, though disappointment sank heavy in my chest. I can't testify, she continued, but check your email. I'm not saying I sent anything before they took my laptop, but maybe check your spam folder. The call ended. I dove for my computer, finding an email with no subject line containing a single attachment, a spreadsheet titled Reconciliation, Backup. Holly had sent me the original transaction records, complete with notes indicating which transfers Parker had specifically instructed her not to discuss with me. It was evidence, but not enough. Not yet. The next week passed in a blur of legal consultations and sleepless nights. My savings dwindled as I paid Gerald's retainer. Former colleagues stopped answering my texts. Industry contacts became suddenly busy whenever I called. Then came the most personal blow. My assistant, Mia, who'd worked alongside me for 5 years, texted asking to meet for coffee. Hope flickered. Perhaps she had information, or at least solidarity to offer. We met at a cafe far from the office. Mia looked tired. Her usual vibrant energy dimmed. They're saying terrible things about you, she said, stirring her coffee endlessly. Parker claims you approved those transfers verbally, that you knew about everything. That's a lie, I said. You know me, Mia. Would I ever authorize that kind of money without documentation? She wouldn't meet my eyes. That's the thing. I told them I remembered you discussing it with Parker, that you approved it. The betrayal felt like physical pain. Why would you say that? They were going to fire me, she whispered. I have my mom's medical bills, Adelaide. I can't be unemployed right now. They made it clear, either back up Parker's version or pack my desk. I sat back, truly seeing the scope of Parker's strategy. He'd identified everyone's vulnerabilities and exploited them masterfully. Those he couldn't threaten, he'd charm. Those who couldn't be charmed would be removed. I understand, I said finally, though the words tasted bitter. You did what you had to do. I'm sorry, Mia said, finally looking up. For what it's worth, Tessa is pushing hardest. Parker sometimes seems uncomfortable, like he's in too deep. A crack in their united front? Perhaps, but too small to matter now. Our annual charity gala, the highlight of our events calendar, was scheduled for the following week. Though I'd been removed from the company, I'd spent months planning this event before my ousting. My curiosity overcame my pride, and I convinced an old industry contact to bring me as her +1. Walking into the venue I'd selected months ago was surreal. My design concept remained intact: interactive art installations, living garden walls, custom lighting I'd spent weeks perfecting. But something new dominated the space: elaborate paper flower arrangements and custom stationery displays at every table. Pressed elegance branding appeared on everything from the programs to the gift bags. Tessa held court near the main display, dressed in a gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When she spotted me across the room, her smile faltered momentarily before recovering with renewed brilliance. I made my way through the crowd, nodding to clients who looked surprised, and sometimes uncomfortable, to see me. Near the bar, I overheard two vendors discussing payment terms. Spotlight's always been reliable before, one said, but they're asking for extended terms suddenly. 60 days instead of 30. Same here, the other replied. And did you notice they cut the serving staff by half, charging premium prices while cutting corners? They were draining the company, taking what they could while the reputation still held. A hand touched my elbow. Parker, impeccable in his tuxedo, whiskey in hand. Adelaide, surprised to see you here. I designed this event, I replied evenly, though I see you've made some additions. Tessa's touch. The clients love it. His confidence seemed forced, his eyes darting around the room rather than meeting mine. How's the legal situation working out for you? I asked. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. There is no legal situation. The board stands behind every decision. Your board, you mean? Since you removed me. He leaned closer. Be smart, Adelaide. Walk away. Take the settlement offer we sent. Start fresh somewhere else. The settlement offer, a pittance compared to what the company was worth, with a non-disclosure agreement attached that would prevent me from ever telling my story. I built this company too, Parker, and now you're done. His voice hardened. Accept it. As he walked away, I noticed something I hadn't before: the slight stiffness in his shoulders, the tension around his eyes. Parker was worried. Good. My financial situation deteriorated rapidly in the following weeks. Legal fees mounted. My apartment building was sold to developers, forcing me to relocate. Banking warnings about overdraft fees arrived with increasing frequency. I moved to a tiny studio in an aging building on the edge of town, the only place I could afford while fighting this battle. One morning, surrounded by moving boxes in my new, much smaller space, I seriously considered giving up, taking Parker's insulting settlement offer, returning to my hometown with my tail between my legs. Then came the notification that broke something inside me. A professional association email announcing award nominees included Tessa Ellis for Innovation in Event Design, with a concept that looked eerily familiar. I clicked through to the detailed submission and felt physically ill. The design was mine, a concept I'd been developing for months, detailed in files I kept on my work computer, the computer that had disappeared during my escorted exit. They weren't just taking my money, they were erasing and replacing my creative identity. That night, I spread everything across my tiny kitchen counter: bank statements, emails, calendar entries, the few documents I'd managed to save before being locked out. Separately, they were concerning but inconclusive. Together, they told a story of calculated betrayal, but it wasn't enough. Not against Parker's resources and connections. Not against a board that had already chosen sides. I needed more. And to get it, I needed to change my approach entirely. The next morning, I created a new email address and registered for a local business networking event under my middle name. If I couldn't fight Parker directly, I would work around him, building a new network while searching for information. The networking breakfast was held at a downtown hotel. I dressed simply, wore minimal makeup, and pulled my hair back, transforming from the polished event planner Parker knew into someone forgettable, someone who could listen without being noticed. I introduced myself as a freelance coordinator new to the area. People love talking to newcomers, sharing insider knowledge and industry gossip. I asked questions about local vendors, venues, payment practices, and listened carefully to the answers. Be careful with spotlight events, a printer warned me over coffee. Their payment terms suddenly changed. We're still waiting on money from 3 months ago. A caterer shared a similar story. So did a lighting technician. A pattern emerged. Vendors left unpaid. Contracts altered after signing. Deposits that mysteriously required recalculation. I began attending every local business event I could find, always listening, always asking innocent questions that revealed more pieces of the puzzle. I started a spreadsheet, tracking companies, amounts, dates, patterns. By the 3rd month of my investigation, 27 local businesses had shared nearly identical experiences with Spotlight under Parker and Tessa's leadership. Each thought they were dealing with an isolated incident. None had connected the dots to see the systematic pattern spanning years. My breakthrough came at a women's entrepreneurship luncheon. The keynote speaker, Dr. Natalie Chen, discussed ethical business practices and the psychology of workplace betrayal. Something in her presentation resonated so deeply that I approached her afterward. Your research on financial misconduct patterns is fascinating, I said. I'd love to learn more. Dr. Chen smiled. Are you one of my students? You look familiar. No, but I'm very interested in business ethics, I replied carefully, especially in small to medium enterprises. We exchanged contact information, and the following week I met her for coffee. Without revealing my personal situation, I described patterns I'd observed in local business practices. This isn't theoretical research, is it? She asked after listening intently. You're building a case. I hesitated, then nodded. I have a former student you should meet, she said. Whitney Summers. She's an investigative journalist focusing on financial misconduct and white-collar crime. If these patterns are as widespread as you suggest, it might interest her. 3 days later, I met Whitney at her office. Unlike Dr. Chen, she recognized me immediately. You're Adelaide Quinn from Spotlight Events, she said. Your company's doing that big investor showcase next month. Not my company anymore, I replied. That's actually related to why I'm here. For the first time, I told my complete story to someone outside my legal team. Whitney listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she studied me with sharp, evaluating eyes. What's your goal here, Adelaide? Revenge? Justice? Your company back? I considered her question carefully. Truth. I want people to know what really happened, and I want to stop them from doing this to anyone else. Whitney leaned back. I've been investigating several financial misconduct cases in the events and hospitality industry. Your situation fits a pattern I'm seeing. If you're willing to go on the record with what you know, combined with what I've uncovered about other businesses. I can't, I admitted. Not yet. The legal situation. Understood. But these vendor issues you've documented. If they were willing to speak out, they're afraid of burning bridges, I explained. This industry runs on relationships. Let me worry about that part, Whitney said. Keep building your documentation. If we can establish a pattern affecting dozens of businesses, individuals become less vulnerable. I left Whitney's office with something I hadn't felt in months. Possibility. The seed of a plan was forming, not just for my redemption, but for something larger. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Password Justice2000 and 23W. Whitney had sent me a draft article titled Systematic Financial Manipulation in Regional Event Industry. It outlined predatory business practices affecting small vendors across the city as spotlight events featured prominently. The article was meticulously researched, connecting dots I hadn't even seen. It didn't name me as a source, but it mentioned former leadership pushed out after questioning financial irregularities. I was still reviewing the document when another text arrived. Timing matters. Spotlight Investor Showcase. 2 weeks from today. Yes or no? My finger hovered over the keyboard. This would be the point of no return. Parker and Tessa's investor showcase was their biggest event of the year. The moment when they courted wealthy potential backers for their innovative merger of events and luxury paper goods. If Whitney published her exposé during that showcase, I typed my response. Yes. The next 2 weeks unfolded with purposeful precision. Whitney interviewed 15 vendors who agreed to go on record about their experiences with Spotlight under Parker and Tessa's leadership. 3 former employees, including Holly from accounting, provided statements about internal financial practices they'd witnessed. I stayed deliberately invisible, feeding information to Whitney while maintaining my distance from the story. Parker and Tessa couldn't know I was involved. 5 days before the investor showcase, Whitney sent me the final draft for review. The article was devastating, methodically documenting a pattern of financial manipulation, delayed payments, and contractual bait and switches affecting dozens of local businesses. It included scanned contracts showing terms that had been altered after signing, email chains documenting broken promises, and a timeline of suspicious financial activities. Most damning were the direct connections to Tessa's company. Whitney had traced the money trail, showing how funds extracted from Spotlight and its vendors had directly financed Pressed Elegance's meteoric rise. Publication set for 7:30 p.m. on showcase night, Whitney texted, the moment everyone has their phones out for the presentation. Perfect timing. The showcase always began with Parker encouraging attendees to share the presentation on social media. Every potential investor would have their phone in hand when Whitney's story broke. 3 days before the showcase, my confidence wavered. What if Parker somehow knew? What if the article wasn't enough? What if people didn't care? My phone rang. Gerald, my attorney. We've been contacted by Spotlight's lawyers, he said without preamble. They want to discuss settlement terms. My heart raced. Why now? After months of stonewalling? They didn't say, but something spooked them. They're suddenly very interested in resolving this quietly. Consent. Had they discovered Whitney's investigation? Or was this just coincidence? What should I do? I asked. Meet with them. Hear their offer. It might tell us what they're afraid of. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon, just 1 day before the showcase. I arrived at Gerald's office 30 minutes early, rehearsing potential scenarios in my head. Parker entered alone, looking thinner than I remembered. The confident swagger had diminished, replaced by tightly controlled anxiety. Adelaide, he nodded curtly. Let's make this simple. We're prepared to offer a significant improvement on our previous settlement package. Gerald raised an eyebrow. Define significant. Parker slid a document across the table. The number made my breath catch, nearly 3 times their previous offer. In exchange, Parker continued, Adelaide signs an expanded non-disclosure agreement. No discussion of company finances, business practices, or the circumstances of her departure. Ever. With anyone. There it was. They knew something was coming. They wanted to silence me before it hit. May we have the room? I asked Gerald. After a moment's hesitation, both attorneys stepped outside, leaving Parker and me alone. What are you afraid of, Parker? I asked softly. I'm trying to be generous here, he replied, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. This isn't generosity, it's panic. What happened? Did someone talk? A muscle twitched in his jaw. Businesses have disagreements. Partners grow apart. I'm offering you a clean break with substantial compensation. After months of calling me incompetent, after destroying my professional reputation, after stealing my designs, I leaned forward. What changed? For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Tessa's gone too far, he said so quietly, I almost missed it. I never wanted. He stopped himself, composure returning. This offer expires at noon tomorrow. After that, we proceed with our countersuit for defamation. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, I didn't know about the design theft. That was all Tessa. The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with the settlement offer and a new realization. Cracks were forming in Parker and Tessa's united front. I called Whitney immediately. They're offering a settlement with an expanded NDA. They know something's coming. Does it change our plan? She asked. I thought about Parker's face, the subtle admission of wrongdoing, the attempt to distance himself from Tessa's actions. Too little, too late. No, we proceed. The morning of the showcase arrived with an unexpected complication. My phone buzzed with urgent messages from 3 of Whitney's sources, all suddenly retracting their statements. They'd been contacted by Spotlight's attorneys with cease and desist letters threatening litigation if they spread defamatory claims. I called Whitney in a panic. "They're picking off our sources. Can you still publish?" "We have enough documentation to proceed," she assured me. "The vendors who backed out are the smaller ones, most vulnerable to legal intimidation. Our core evidence remains solid." Still, doubt crept in. Parker and Tessa were fighting back hard. What else might they do before evening? At 4:30 p.m., Whitney called again. "We have a problem. My editor is getting nervous about the legal implications. He wants to delay publication for additional review." My stomach dropped. "How long?" "A week, maybe more. I'm pushing back, but the showcase is tonight," I reminded her. "If we miss this window..." "I know. I'm doing everything I can." At 6:15 p.m., Whitney texted, "Still fighting for tonight. Not looking good." Our plan was unraveling. I paced my tiny apartment, weighing options. Without Whitney's article, I had no leverage, no platform, no voice. Parker and Tessa would continue their investor showcase unchallenged, securing millions in new funding based on lies and stolen ideas. At 6:45, a new text from Whitney, "Editor killed the story for tonight. Wants more legal review. I'm sorry." I sat heavily on my bed, defeat washing over me. After months of careful work, everything had fallen apart at the final hour. Parker and Tessa would win again. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. "Adelaide? This is Ben Torres. I was head of production at Spotlight until last month." I vaguely remembered him. Quiet, efficient, always in the background managing technical aspects of our events. "They fired me after I questioned some equipment purchases," he continued. "Listen, I'm working tonight's showcase, handling the multimedia presentation. Parker doesn't know I picked up the freelance gig through the venue's technical team." My pulse quickened. "What are you saying, Ben? I have access to everything. The presentation slides, the video system, the audio, everything." Hope flickered back to life. "What did you have in mind?" At 7:20 p.m., I stood at the back of the elegant ballroom where Spotlight's investor showcase was underway. My press pass, arranged by Whitney, identified me as her photographer assistant. With my hair styled differently and glasses I didn't need, no one gave me a second glance. The room buzzed with potential investors, wealthy individuals, and corporate representatives looking for the next big opportunity. Parker worked the crowd masterfully, while Tessa showcased her luxury paper products at elegant displays around the room. At precisely 7:30, Parker took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. We're excited to share the future of Spotlight events and pressed elegance, a revolutionary merger of experiences and tangible luxury." The lights dimmed as Parker continued. "Before we begin, I encourage you to share this presentation on your social platforms. Our hashtag for tonight is displayed on your tables." On cue, phones appeared in hands throughout the room. The massive projection screen behind Parker displayed the opening slide of his presentation. He clicked his remote to advance to the next slide. Instead of his carefully prepared investment opportunity overview, the screen displayed a simple headline: "Financial Investigation, Pattern of Embezzlement, and Vendor Fraud Uncovered at Spotlight Events." Parker froze, confusion crossing his face as he clicked again. The next slide appeared, a chart tracking the $800,000 transfers from Spotlight to Pressed Elegance, complete with dates and transaction codes. "There seems to be a technical difficulty," Parker said, voice strained as he frantically clicked the remote. Each click revealed more damning evidence: altered contracts, manipulated financial statements, screenshots of threatening emails to vendors who demanded payment. Tessa rushed toward the stage as confused murmurs spread through the audience. The screen changed again, showing Whitney's article in its entirety, published not in the business journal as planned, but on the investment showcase screens themselves. Ben had found another way. Phones throughout the room now pointed at the screen, capturing evidence instead of promotion. Several attendees were already reading the article, faces darkening with concern. "This presentation has been hacked," Tessa announced, grabbing the microphone from Parker. "These allegations are completely fabricated. Our attorneys will address this immediately." The final slide appeared, a simple statement: "Evidence packages containing complete documentation have been delivered to the District Attorney's Office, the State Financial Regulatory Board, and the Consumer Protection Division. Case number 27, CV202385541, an actual case number. Gerald had filed everything that morning. Tessa's composure cracked completely. "Turn it off!" she screamed at the technical booth. "Shut it down now!" But the damage was done. Investors were already leaving. Phones pressed to ears as they called their attorneys. Others photographed the evidence still displayed on screen. Parker stood motionless on stage, remote hanging limply from his hand, watching his future collapse in real time. I slipped out the side door as security personnel rushed in. In the lobby, I passed a woman in a dark suit speaking intently into her phone. "Yes, I need to pull all our committed funds immediately." "No, I don't care about the deposit. This is clearly a liability situation." My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Mission accomplished. File copies secured." Outside, the cool evening air filled my lungs as I walked away from the venue. For the first time in months, the tightness in my chest eased. I hadn't just exposed their fraud. I'd done it in front of the very people whose money and connections they desperately needed. 3 days later, the district attorney's office announced a formal investigation into financial improprieties at Spotlight Events. During the execution of a search warrant, Tessa was caught attempting to delete files from her computer, adding obstruction of justice to the growing list of charges. Parker, facing the collapse of everything, made a desperate move. He contacted Gerald, offering full cooperation with authorities in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His signed statement detailed how Tessa had orchestrated most of the financial manipulation, though he admitted full awareness and participation. The legal consequences proved less satisfying than I'd hoped. Financial crimes rarely receive appropriate punishment in our system. Parker and Tessa both accepted plea deals involving restitution, probation, and community service rather than jail time. But the professional and personal consequences were profound. Court-ordered restitution forced liquidation of their assets, including their home and Tessa's company. Industry associations revoked their memberships. The Design Award Committee publicly rescinded Tessa's nomination after confirming the submission contained my stolen concepts. 6 months later, I received an unexpected email from Parker. He was working at his uncle's struggling print shop in another state. Tessa had left him after her family withdrew financial support following the scandal. He wanted to apologize, to explain his actions, to make amends somehow. I never replied. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, only survived. Today, I operate a smaller but ethically grounded event planning company. My client list is rebuilding slowly but steadily, many returning after learning the truth about what happened at Spotlight. I've instituted transparent financial practices and fair vendor payment terms as core principles of the business. The true victory wasn't watching Parker and Tessa's downfall. It was bringing together a community of small business owners who had been similarly victimized, helping them reclaim their narratives and receive justified compensation. Together, we transformed isolated grievances into collective justice. Sometimes winning isn't about survival alone. It's about rewriting the ending on your own terms. If my story resonated with you today, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might be facing their own professional betrayal. I've learned that speaking truth, even when your voice shakes, can be the most powerful form of reclaiming your story. Leave a comment if you've ever had to stand up against someone who tried to erase you. Your experiences might help someone else find their courage. Someone like you will never meet important people in Washington. Imogen sneered, looking down at my proposal across her pristine glass desk. Your background is quaint, but hardly relevant to national economic policy. I gripped the chair arms as 20 pairs of eyes darted away, everyone suddenly fascinated with their notepads. 3 years of research, 18-hour days analyzing rural development patterns, and countless site visits to struggling farming communities, dismissed with a flick of her wrist. The data speaks for itself, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the heat climbing my neck. The micro-investment model shows consistent 27% growth in— The numbers are interesting, Valerie, Imogen interrupted, emphasizing my name like it was a joke. But presentation matters in politics. Your accent alone would make senior officials uncomfortable. Someone snickered. I didn't need to look to know it was Trevor, her golden boy who'd been with the Economic Advisory Unit half as long as me, but somehow occupied the office next to hers. Besides, Imogen continued, sliding my proposal aside, Trevor's approach aligns better with conventional wisdom. His presentation on agricultural subsidies will represent our department at the forum. I watched as Trevor preened. Despite the fact his entire presentation was built on conclusions I'd written, just twisted to benefit massive agricultural corporations instead of actual farmers. Trevor understands how Washington works, Imogen announced to the room. He has presence, Polish. Her eyes crawled over my department store blazer. Some qualities can't be taught. The meeting dispersed. As everyone filed out, Imogen called over her shoulder. Valerie, be sure to clean up the conference room, and we need those projection numbers updated by morning. I stood alone, surrounded by abandoned coffee cups and crumpled paper. Through the glass walls, I could see her laughing with Trevor by the elevator. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your micro-investment analysis was brilliant. Those in power should be listening. Check your email. A friend in Washington. When my desk phone rang the next morning, I nearly ignored it. Buried under the spreadsheets Imogen had demanded, the caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. prefix I didn't recognize. Economics Department, Valerie speaking. Please hold for the President of the United States. The pen dropped from my fingers. Across the open office, Imogen was strutting toward me, coffee in hand, likely ready to demand yesterday's calculations. Hello? Am I speaking with Valerie, the agricultural economist who submitted the Rural Micro-Investment Hub analysis? The unmistakable voice echoed slightly through my ancient desk phone. I pressed it tighter against my ear, convinced I was hallucinating. Yes, sir, that's me. My voice emerged steadier than I felt. Imogen halted mid-stride, her coffee tilted dangerously. Your analysis is exactly what we've been looking for, the president continued. I've been reviewing competing approaches for the National Economic Forum, and your data from those test communities is compelling. We've been looking at this all wrong. The ceramic mug slipped from Imogen's fingers, shattering against the tile. Coffee splashed across her cream-colored heels as her mouth fell open. Sir, I thank you, I managed, heart hammering against my ribs. I want you at the White House tomorrow to present directly to the Economic Advisory Council. We're changing direction based on your recommendations. When I hung up, the silence was absolute. 20 economists frozen at their desks, eyes ping-ponging between me and Imogen, who now stood in a puddle of coffee, her carefully composed face cracking. If you're as shocked as everyone in my office was that day, you might want to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what happens next is something nobody, especially not Imogen, saw coming. My name is Valerie Reyes, 32 years old, and until that phone call, I was the invisible workhorse of the Government Economic Advisory Unit, not the person whose name appeared on reports, never the one invited to press conferences or policy meetings, just the analyst who stayed late, crunching numbers while others took credit. I grew up on a struggling peach farm in Georgia, watching my parents fight against drought, falling prices, and predatory loans. When our farm finally went under, my father took a security job at the local mall. My mother cleaned houses. They scraped together enough for community college, where I discovered my knack for economics, specifically the kind that might have saved our farm. State university scholarships led to a master's degree, then a government position that promised meaningful work. I believed I could change things from the inside, help create policies that would protect farms like my family's. Then I met Imogen Caldwell. She'd noticed me during a department presentation my first month. Not for my ideas, but for my accent. How refreshing to have someone so authentic, she'd said, her smile not reaching her eyes. The next day, she requested me for her team. For 3 years, I'd researched, analyzed, and written while watching my findings twisted to support conventional models that benefited large agricultural conglomerates. My name appeared in acknowledgments, never as lead author. When I raised concerns, Imogen would cut me off. Let's hear from someone with broader perspective. The Presidential Economic Forum had been my breaking point. When team assignments excluded me from presenting my own research on rural revitalization, I'd gone around Imogen, submitting my findings through the anonymous suggestion portal created for the initiative. Now, as I stood by my desk with the president's words still ringing in my ears, Imogen's recovery was remarkably swift. Well, she announced to the silent office, this is wonderful news for our department. She stepped delicately over the broken mug. Valerie has been implementing our strategic direction beautifully. I'll need to accompany her tomorrow to ensure her presentation aligns with our broader objectives. 24 hours later, I stood alone in the Roosevelt Room, arranging my notes while senior officials filed in. The president's chief economic advisor nodded as I tested my presentation slides. Your analysis changed the president's entire thinking on rural development, she said quietly. He rejected the conventional approach yesterday. Your former boss was quite insistent about attending, she's been stopped at security. As if summoned by her words, the door burst open. Imogen strode in, slightly breathless, her perfect hair askew. "So sorry for the delay," she announced, extending manicured hands to the nearest officials. There was confusion at the gate. "I'm Imogen Caldwell, department head. I should introduce our strategy before my junior colleague begins." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The president's advisor straightened. "Miss Caldwell, this meeting was called specifically for Valerie Reyes to present her micro-investment model, which, according to multiple staff testimonies, you repeatedly blocked from consideration. Your department's conventional proposal was reviewed and rejected yesterday." Imogen's smile froze. "There must be some misunderstanding. Valerie works under my direct supervision. Her research reflects our department's collective approach, not according to the analysts we interviewed," the advisor continued, "or the meeting records showing you assigned credit for Miss Reyes' work to other team members. The president specifically requested Miss Reyes alone. Security will escort you back to your office. Your department transfer paperwork is being processed." As Imogen was led away, her eyes locked on mine. The naked hatred there would have terrified me yesterday. Today, I simply held her gaze until she disappeared down the hallway. When the president entered minutes later, he shook my hand and asked about my family's farm before the meeting began. "My parents lost everything trying to survive in a system that was rigged against small farmers," I told him. "I designed this micro-investment model thinking of them." "Well," he said, "today we start changing that system." I opened my presentation, acutely aware that this moment, presenting my own work, under my own name, to people who could actually implement it, was something Imogen had promised would never happen. But the real story was just beginning. The weeks following my White House presentation unfolded like someone else's life. My micro-investment model became the centerpiece of the president's Rural Economic Initiative. My phone rang constantly with calls from congressional staffers, think tanks, and media outlets. The same colleagues who had avoided eye contact during Imogen's reign now lingered by my desk with coffee invitations. I accepted none of them. "You should celebrate," my mother insisted during our weekly call. "This is everything you worked for." But something kept me awake at night, staring at my ceiling. The victory felt hollow. Imogen hadn't been fired, just transferred to the Department of Transportation with the same pay grade. Trevor still strutted around with his promotions intact, despite presenting stolen work. And across rural America, families like mine continued losing their homes while the wheels of government turned slowly. The morning after my White House presentation, I arrived early to find my desk items packed in a cardboard box. "Administrative reassignment," explained the department secretary, not meeting my eyes. "You've been moved to the executive floor, where decisions were made, where careers were built, where I'd never been invited before." My new office had windows overlooking the National Mall. My nameplate, Valerie Reyes, Senior Economic Advisor, gleamed on the door. Inside, leather chairs surrounded a walnut conference table. Fresh flowers sat on the credenza. "The director wants to meet you for lunch," the assistant said before leaving me alone. I stood frozen until my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Watch your back. Not everyone's happy about your rise. A friend." During lunch, Director Wilson beamed at me across white tablecloths. "The president calls you the farm girl who's revolutionizing rural economics. We have big plans for you." "And Imogen?" I asked, unable to help myself. His smile dimmed slightly. "Lateral transfer. Nothing worth discussing." Back at the office, I found an invitation to join the National Economic Council's Rural Development Task Force. My chest tightened with vindication and terror. This was everything I'd worked for. A chance to implement policies that might have saved my family's farm. That evening, I worked late, reviewing data from pilot communities. The knock on my door came at 8:17 p.m. Trevor leaned against the doorframe, his smile artificially bright. "Quite the promotion," he said, entering uninvited. "Everyone's talking about it. Do you need something?" I kept my tone neutral. He dropped into a chair across from me. "Just checking in on our rising star. We worked together for years, after all." "Did we? I remember doing the work while you presented it." His smile didn't falter. "Ancient history. We're on the same team now. In fact, I've been asked to join your task force." My stomach dropped. "By whom?" "Director Wilson. He thinks I bring valuable perspective on conventional models." Trevor leaned forward. "Look, Imogen made mistakes. I never agreed with how she treated you. You laughed when she mocked my accent. People do stupid things to survive. You've won, Valerie. The question is whether you want allies going forward. After he left, I sat motionless, staring at the Capitol dome illuminated against the night sky. The text message warning echoed in my mind. Not everyone's happy about your rise. The task force's first meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. Wednesday afternoon, my assistant delivered a thick folder stamped confidential. Preliminary member profiles, she explained. Director Wilson thought you should review them before tomorrow. Inside were dossiers on each member, including Trevor. His file contained emails between him and Imogen, strategizing how to manage the Valerie situation, dating back 2 years. They had systematically diverted my projects, edited my name from reports, and scheduled key meetings when I had conflicts. More disturbing were recent emails between Trevor and Director Wilson, discussing how to integrate conventional approaches into my model, essentially gutting its innovative elements while maintaining the appealing label. My throat tightened. Nothing had changed, just the players and their tactics. That night, I couldn't sleep. By 5 a.m., I'd drafted 2 documents, my task force opening statement and my resignation letter. I wasn't sure which I would use. The conference room filled quickly Thursday morning. Trevor arrived last, sliding into a seat near Director Wilson. Neither acknowledged me until the room quieted. Before we begin, Director Wilson announced, I want to recognize Valerie's extraordinary contribution. Her micro-investment model has captured national attention. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. However, he continued, implementing such a dramatic departure from established policy requires tempering. Trevor has prepared some modifications that retain the innovative branding while harmonizing with existing frameworks. The room temperature seemed to plummet. Trevor tapped his tablet, and a revised version of my model appeared on the main screen, recognizable in name only. The core elements that made it effective for small farmers had been surgically removed. We'll need unanimous task force approval, Director Wilson continued, but I'm confident we can reach consensus. 20 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from sympathy to calculation. The silence stretched as I considered the resignation letter in my bag. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a different document. Before we discuss modifications, I said quietly, I'd like to share something. With a few keystrokes, I projected an email chain onto the screen. Trevor and Director Wilson discussing how to neutralize the farm girl's influence, while capitalizing on presidential interest. Where did you get those? Director Wilson's face flushed dark red. The same place I got these, I replied, switching to documents showing how traditional agricultural subsidies had been diverted to major corporations while family farms collapsed. And these, another slide, internal analyses proving my model would help small farmers while reducing corporation subsidies. That's classified information, Trevor hissed. Yes, it is. I looked around the table. Yesterday, copies were delivered to the president's economic team, 3 congressional oversight committees, and select journalists. The blood drained from Director Wilson's face. Valerie, he began, his voice strained. Let's discuss this privately. I'm done with private discussions where truth gets buried. I turned to the other task force members. You have a choice today. Support a model that actually helps struggling communities, or continue a system that's destroying them. The meeting dissolved into chaos. By afternoon, news alerts buzzed across Washington. Economic Task Force rebellion. Whistleblower exposes corruption in rural policy. That evening, as reporters camped outside my apartment building, my phone rang with that same Washington prefix. The president would like a word, his chief of staff said coldly. My hands trembled as I waited. I'd risked everything on this gamble. Miss Reyes, the president's voice was unreadable. You've created quite the situation. Yes, sir. Those documents weren't meant for public consumption. No, sir. A long pause filled the line. I could hear papers shuffling. My economic team says your original model, unmodified, would redirect approximately 30% of current agricultural subsidies away from the top 10 corporations and towards small farming communities. That's correct, sir. Another pause. Those corporations have considerable influence in Washington. I'm aware, sir. This will make implementing your model significantly more difficult. I closed my eyes, preparing for the inevitable dismissal. I understand. Good. His tone shifted. Because I'm appointing you to lead the implementation personally, effective immediately. My eyes flew open. Sir? I was elected to help communities like yours, Miss Reyes, not to protect corporate interests. You've made my job harder but the path clearer. Report directly to me from now on. After hanging up, I stood by my window watching news vans below. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. Phase 1 complete. Ready when you are for Phase 2. A friend. I finally understood who my mysterious ally was and what needed to happen next. If you're wondering how this all connects back to Imogen, don't worry. She hasn't been forgotten. In fact, she's about to play the most important role in this entire story. The following morning, I arrived at the transportation department where Imogen had been transferred. Security waved me through. The president's new task force director apparently had clearance everywhere. I found her in a windowless office half the size of her previous one, surrounded by binders on highway maintenance regulations. When she looked up, surprise flashed across her face before her features arranged into practiced disdain. "The famous Valerie Reyes," she said, leaning back. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? I wanted to see how you were adjusting." Her laugh held no humor. "Come to gloat? How disappointingly predictable." I sat across from her without invitation. "Actually, I came to offer you something. Unless it's your resignation, I'm not interested." "What about redemption?" Her eyebrow arched. "Excuse me? The president has given me full authority over implementing the Rural Micro-Investment Initiative. I need a deputy with political instincts I lack." Imogen's eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious." "Completely. You understand Washington's power dynamics better than I ever will. After everything that happened, you expect me to work for you?" Her tone was incredulous, but I caught the flicker of calculation behind her eyes. "With me," I corrected, "your name would appear alongside mine on all official documentation." "Why would you offer this?" I leaned forward. "Because despite everything, you're brilliant at navigating bureaucracy, and because I believe people deserve second chances." The contempt in her expression softened fractionally. "And if I refuse, then you continue cataloging highway maintenance reports until retirement." She tapped her pen against the desk, considering. "I'd have real input, not just a figurehead position. Substantial influence on implementation strategy. I'll need time to consider." "Of course." I stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The president expects our first implementation report Monday morning. I'm working through the weekend at the Jefferson Hotel Conference Center. Join me there Saturday at 9 a.m. if you're interested." As I turned to leave, I caught her expression, suspicion, warring with ambition. Perfect. Outside, I texted the number saved simply as A. "She's considering it. Prepare the Jefferson conference room as discussed." The reply came instantly. "Everything's ready. Phase 2 begins Saturday." What Imogen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly suspect, was that I'd discovered exactly how deep her betrayal went. Not just suppressing my work or mocking my background, but something far worse that had destroyed lives beyond my own. Something I'd uncovered only after gaining access to restricted files. Something that would be exposed Saturday morning at the Jefferson Hotel, with carefully selected witnesses present. I drove home through the gathering dusk, rehearsing exactly what I would say when the moment arrived. 3 years of being underestimated, dismissed, and sabotaged had taught me patience. The trap was set perfectly. Imogen thought she was walking into an opportunity for career resurrection. She had no idea she was walking into a reckoning. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. I reached the Jefferson Hotel at 7:30 a.m., giving myself ample time to review everything with my mysterious ally before Imogen arrived. The conference room overlooked the Washington Monument, its white marble gleaming in the morning sun. Fresh coffee steamed from a silver carafe. Folders waited at each seat, identical blue portfolios embossed with the presidential seal. The door opened precisely at 7:45. Annie Chen walked in, her Secret Service badge catching the light. "Everything's set," she said, placing her laptop on the table. "Surveillance confirmed Imogen left her apartment 20 minutes ago. Annie, the president's deputy security advisor and my anonymous texter, approached me the day after my White House presentation. The president values your perspective," she'd said, "but there are concerns about interference. I've been assigned to monitor certain individuals with questionable motives." What had started as protective surveillance had uncovered something far darker than either of us anticipated. "The others will arrive at 9:30, Annie continued, tapping her screen. "That gives you 30 minutes alone with her before they join." "Perfect." I double-checked the folder marked with Imogen's name. "And she doesn't know about the additional attendees?" "Confirmed. She believes it's just you two discussing implementation strategy." At 8:56, my phone buzzed with a text from the lobby security desk. "Miss Caldwell has arrived." Annie gathered her things. "Remember, Let her incriminate herself. Don't show your full hand until everyone's present. After she slipped out through the side door, I stood alone, watching the elevator numbers climb. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my hands remained steady. Imogen arrived precisely at 9, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, her expression carefully neutral. "Valerie," she nodded, scanning the empty room. "I expected a larger team. They'll join us later." I gestured to the coffee. "Help yourself." She poured a cup, adding cream with practiced precision. "I've reviewed your model again. It has potential, but implementation will face significant headwinds from established interests. That's why I need your expertise." I indicated the chair beside mine. "Shall we begin?" For 30 minutes, we discussed rural development statistics, funding mechanisms, and political challenges. I watched her gradually relax as the conversation remained professional, even collaborative. She spoke with genuine insight about bureaucratic pathways, occasionally referencing her past successes implementing complex policies. "Your biggest challenge will be the Agricultural Commerce Committee," she noted, circling a name on her notepad. "Chairman Livingston has blocked similar initiatives for years." "I understand he has close ties to Grow Corp," I replied casually. Her pen paused fractionally. "Most committee members have industry relationships. It's the nature of Washington." "Of course." I checked my watch. "Our additional participants should be arriving shortly." Her eyebrows lifted. "Additional participants?" The door opened before I could respond. Director Wilson entered first, followed by 3 members of the president's economic team. Behind them came 2 individuals in dark suits, representatives from the Inspector General's office. Imogen's posture stiffened instantly. "I wasn't aware this was a formal meeting." "Just gathering key stakeholders," I said pleasantly. "You know Director Wilson, of course." Wilson nodded tightly, his expression guarded. The others took their seats around the table. "Before we continue," I began, standing to address the room, "I want to thank everyone for coming on short notice. We're here to discuss not just the implementation of the micro-investment model, but certain obstacles that have come to light." Imogen's eyes narrowed slightly. "What obstacles?" I opened my laptop. 3 days ago, while reviewing historical data on agricultural policy decisions, I discovered something concerning. The screen behind me illuminated with a spreadsheet showing policy recommendations from the past 5 years alongside corporate profit margins. The correlation was unmistakable. Whenever our department pushed policies that helped large agricultural corporations, their profits soared while small farm bankruptcies increased. "This pattern caught my attention," I continued. "But what troubled me more was discovering these policy recommendations originated from outside consultants hired through third-party contractors." Imogen set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "Using external expertise is standard practice." Indeed. The concerning part was these consultants' identities were concealed through multiple shell companies. I clicked to the next slide. Until now, the screen showed incorporation documents linking these shell companies back to a single source, Meridian Consulting, a firm listing Imogen Caldwell as its principal partner. The room went deadly quiet. While serving as a government economic advisor, I said into the silence, Imogen was simultaneously paid by the very corporations her policy recommendations benefited. Director Wilson's face drained of color. "Is this verified?" "Thoroughly," confirmed one of the Inspector General representatives. "We've been investigating for 6 months." Imogen's calm facade cracked. "This is absurd. We have the banking records," the investigator interrupted, "and emails, quite explicit ones about ensuring certain policy adjustments to benefit your clients." I turned to face her directly. "What I couldn't understand was why you targeted my research so aggressively. Then, I found this." The next slide showed an email from Imogen to GrowCorp's CEO. "The Reyes model threatens our entire arrangement. Her micro-investment approach would redirect funds from subsidiary channels to independent farmers. I'm handling it personally." Imogen's face contorted. "You had no right to access private communications." "They weren't accessed illegally," the second investigator clarified. "They were provided by a GrowCorp whistleblower." Annie Chen stepped forward from the back of the room. "The same whistleblower who alerted us to review Miss Reyes' suppressed research in the first place." Understanding dawned in Imogen's eyes. "You orchestrated this entire thing," she whispered. "From the beginning." "No," I said quietly. "You did. I simply created space for the truth." She lunged for her bag, but Annie was faster, blocking her path. "Those files are government property, Miss Caldwell," Annie said, "and you're not leaving until our discussion concludes." What followed was 2 hours of methodical questioning. The Inspector General's team had built a comprehensive case, not just consulting improprieties, but evidence that Imogen had deliberately targeted policies benefiting small farming communities like mine. Did you know? I asked when the formal questioning paused. About my family's farm? Something flickered across her face, not quite remorse, but recognition. Georgia peach farmers weren't specifically targeted, she said finally. You were simply collateral damage in a larger strategy. 67% of small peach farms in Georgia failed after your policy was implemented, I said, including my parents. That's not collateral damage. That's devastation. As the meeting concluded, Imogen was escorted out by the investigators. Director Wilson remained behind, ashen-faced. I had no knowledge, he began. We'll discuss your involvement separately. One of the president's advisors cut in. For now, your focus should be cooperating fully with the investigation. When everyone except Annie had departed, I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. You okay? She asked, closing her laptop. I thought I'd feel different, I admitted. More satisfied. Revenge rarely brings the closure we expect, she said, but justice might. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my childhood home, repurchased with my government salary and a small loan from the first micro-investment hub established in Georgia. My parents moved back in the previous week, my father already making plans for the spring peach crop. The criminal investigation into Imogen had expanded to include 12 other officials and 3 major agricultural corporations. The resulting scandal had created unprecedented momentum for my micro-investment model, now implemented in rural communities across 7 states. As I helped my father repair the porch railing, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Former economic advisor pleads guilty in agricultural corruption case, faces 5 to 7 years. Attached was Imogen's mugshot, her carefully maintained image now replaced with hollow eyes and institutional clothing. My father glanced over. That her? I nodded, putting my phone away. You know, he said, measuring a length of wood, when you first told us what happened, your mother wanted to drive to Washington and give that woman a piece of her mind. And you? He looked out over the budding peach trees, restored to our family after nearly a decade. I figured living well is the best revenge. This, he gestured to our recovering farm. This is better than anything that could happen to her. That evening, as twilight settled over the orchard, I walked the property alone. In the distance, lights glowed from neighboring farms, families who'd also benefited from the micro-investment program, families who might have lost everything, as mine nearly did. My revenge against Imogen wasn't in her downfall, satisfying as that justice was. It came in this moment, standing on land that had been returned to my family, surrounded by a community being rebuilt, watching policies I'd created bring life back to places long abandoned by those in power. Imogen had been right about one thing. People like me rarely met powerful people in Washington. Sometimes, we became them instead. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps share these stories of justice and perseverance with others who might need to hear them. And if you've ever stood up against someone who underestimated you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes the quietest voices create the most powerful changes.